Chapter 244. When the news about Bull 2 was sent to the backstage, the Japanese, who had always been cautious and humble, suddenly became more confident. But even so, they just stood at a distance and didn't come forward to communicate with others. This made it difficult for others to find trouble with them. Zhonghai was from Bing City, and all the people in the northeast hated the Japanese. To be exact, all the people in Huaxia hated the Japanese. So, Zhonghai also hated the Japanese. But he did not have any relationship with them. This made Zhonghai unable to do anything to them. What's more, there was a guy in front of him who was looking for trouble with him, Rosalind Cartwright. The final result is out. 9. 3 points. It is a very high result. Just when the people in the backstage were whispering to each other, the staff reported the final result. When they heard 9. 3 points, everyone could not help but take a deep breath. With this result, it was not impossible for the Japanese to win the championship. Although the Angus cow from Cartwright Company was not bad, it was not easy to get 9. 3 points. What's more, Suzuki Company had a bigger Wagyu cow. If this cow was 9. 3 points, then the Wagyu cow must be 9. 5 points. Seems like the Japanese will be the winner this year. The people from the two companies next to them, Truman and Baveta, were whispering. However, they didn't care because their main project location was in the central and western parts of the United States. They just came to the east to join in the fun. The one who really lost face was the Cartwright Company. But now, Cartwright Company was not in the mood to care about the Japanese. In the eyes of Cartwright Company's manager, Rosalind Cartwright, it was better to let the Japanese win the title than to let Zhonghai win the title. Letting the Japanese win the title, at least the Japanese will prove to the world that their beef is the best. They can accept losing to the Japanese in beef. Although they will be scolded when they return to the company, it was better than being kicked out. However, if he lost to Zhonghai, it would mean that his backyard was on fire. That would be troublesome. Right now, his thoughts were probably similar to the Empress Dowager of the previous dynasty before the Huaxia. It was better to be an ally than a servant. Of course, Zhonghai was not a slave of the Cartwright Company, but losing to a manor in the eastern region would make them lose face. What you need to pay attention to now is not to bicker with us, but to remember our bet. We are betting on whether you can become the champion. Otherwise you should prepare the 10 million. After He Nyo came down, the next one to come up was the Cartwright Company. Hearing the staff's words, Rosalind Cartwright chuckled disdainfully and then walked straight ahead. Soon, he and the others brought the slaughtered cow to the front of the stage. Although the Cartwright Company was not very good, they had to admit that their selection of cows was not bad. A 755 kilograms cow was killed to 506 kilograms, which exceeded the highest average slaughter rate by 2 percentage points. After all, it was the strongest cow king selected from millions of cows. It was definitely comparable to the Japanese Nyo. Among the 506 kilograms of beef, 7 kilograms had reached the superior grade. The ratio of superior grade beef was as high as 8.4%. This kind of slaughter rate was very terrifying. In addition to the superior grade beef, there was also a lot of superior grade beef. This also made the people outside cheer unconsciously. In the end, this cow got a high score of 9.6. It was 0.3 points higher than the Japanese Nyo. In the eyes of these people, if the Japanese Nyo behind was not outstanding, then this cow might be today's champion. As for Zhonghai's beautiful cow yesterday, no one remembered it. The people in front could not remember it because they would ignore it, but the people backstage knew something about yesterday's situation. When the people of the Cartwright Company stepped down again, Rosalind Cartwright deliberately glanced at Zhonghai and smiled proudly. In his opinion, this result was almost guaranteed. Even if there was no way to beat the Suzuki Japanese Nyo, it would not be a problem to beat Zhonghai's cow. Although he was worried that the quality of Zhonghai's cow was good. Even if the quality of the cow was good, Zhonghai's 20,000 cows would not be able to reach 8.4% of the superior grade beef. If he had known that his cow was so good, perhaps he would not have gone to find trouble with Zhonghai. Of course, on the surface, he was completely unaware of this matter. Even if there was a problem, it would be Paul Cartwright's problem. It had nothing to do with him. Now he felt that he was being too cautious. How could someone like Zhonghai be worthy of being his opponent? He was thinking too much. Seeing him walk down proudly, the corners of Zhang Hai's mouth twitched unconsciously. This guy was definitely courting death. After he came down, it was the turn of Suzuki's largest Japanese Neo. After a while, a louder cheer was heard. Rosalind Cartwright, who had been very proud of himself, could not help but smile when he saw the data sent by the staff in front of him. Judging from the news, he might be in trouble this time. His opponent's Japanese Neo had produced 67 kilograms of superior-grade beef. Although this data was not very scary compared to the original weight of the Japanese Neo, the quality of the beef was here. When this big piece of beef was thrown on the scale, not only the audience's eyes lit up, but also the judge's eyes. Sitting below, Zhang Dihai and Prawalton, as well as the purchasing staff of other companies, were all discussing in a low voice. This time, the people of Japan obviously came with bad intentions. This kind of beef was definitely the best in Japan or the United States. The 67 kilograms of superior-grade beef was $700 per kilogram, so the beef alone was worth $46,900. In addition, there were nearly 200 kilograms of specially selected beef, which was $250 per kilogram, so that was more than $40,000. There were also some scraps of superior grade, standard grade, and commercial grade beef. After this calculation, the value of a Japanese Neo was as high as $100,000. After this calculation, everyone present could not help but be stunned. Especially those who raised cattle, they had some difficulty breathing. The value of a Japanese Neo was as high as $100,000. Even if it cost $50,000 to buy seeds and raise a cow, it would still make $50,000. In the United States, a middle-class family wouldn't even make $50,000 a year after paying taxes. But this cow was more than enough. This was just one Japanese Neo. What if there were 10, 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 Japanese Neo? They would make a fortune. Of course, they were just thinking about it. A Japanese Neo of this level not only had to be selected from many herds, but also had to be specially raised. In fact, the cost of such a Japanese Neo was about $60,000. If they were to sell it, they would have to deduct the tax. In fact, one Japanese Neo could only make about $10,000 per Japanese Neo. But even so, it was enough to make people go crazy. But when they thought about the status of this kind of Japanese Neo, they could only sigh helplessly. Sometimes they thought too much. King Neo, King Neo, King Neo. Seeing the Japanese Neo being dissected on the stage, the audience could not help but shout. To them, it was rare to see such an ox king. I still remember the last time I saw a Japanese Neo that could produce more than 60 kilograms of premium beef. That was 30 years ago. You were not very old at that time. Looking at the Japanese Neo on the stage that had been dissected, Zhang Dihai, who was sitting in the audience, said with a sigh. His son, who was beside him, heard his words and looked at him. Seeing the trace of loneliness on his father's face, he knew that he was thinking of his mother again. At this time, he did not need to say anything. He just needed to let his father know that he was still by his side. So the man did not say anything. Instead, he patted his father. "I'm fine. By the way, didn't little Zhang's Neo also enter the finals? None of them came out. It seems that the last two Japanese Neo are his. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse for him to follow this Japanese Neo." Waving his hand, Zhang Dihai said softly with a smile. Then, he changed the topic and said with a little surprise. Indeed, in a competition like this, the first place would definitely be the least popular, while the second place would be more popular. But to follow such a good Japanese Neo, no one knew whether it was a blessing or a curse for Zhang Hai's Neo. If Zhang Hai's Neo was better than this Japanese Neo, then needless to say, the champion would naturally be Zhang Hai. But if Zhang Hai's Neo was not as good as this Japanese Neo, then it would be troublesome. So even Zhang Dihai was a little worried for Zhang Hai. At this moment, the judges' scores were out. It was 9-7 points. If it wasn't for the fact that these people were Japanese, the scores would have been 9-8 or even 9 points. Actually, the Americans were also very xenophobic. "Looks like you are going to lose 10 million. When the score came out, the people backstage were naturally happy and sad. Rosalind Carlyle, who was originally a little worried, felt a lot more relaxed at this time. 9-7. Although his Neo lost, when he thought that he could step on Zhang Hai and make 10 million, the depression in his heart lessened. "My Neo hasn't appeared yet. Why are you in such a hurry? But I advise you to prepare 10 million first. You only have 1 hour. Glancing at Rosalind Carlyle, Zhang Hai raised a finger and said faintly. Then, he led his men to take his first Nyo to the exhibition stage. As soon as he arrived at the exhibition stage, he saw the old man who said that he would go to his manor yesterday suddenly stand up. It was obvious that he was very interested in his Nyo. Zhang Hai also smiled at the people under the stage, then motioned to the butcher next to him to start cutting the Nyo. With Zhang Hai's instructions, the butcher instantly tore the cloth on Zhang Hai's Nyo. Chapter 245. Ha! The instant the cloth was lifted, a headless, skinless, and tailed cow appeared before everyone's eyes. The picture of the perfect distribution of muscles and fats in the beef also appeared before everyone's eyes. For others, even if it was a poor marble pattern, it was still a marble pattern after all. Marble patterns represented the existence of a special grade, and such meat was usually wrapped in other muscles and the like. But for Zhang Hai's cow, the moment the cloth was lifted, the beef's back, chest, hooves and so on could be clearly seen. Marbled beef was clearly visible. Judging from the distribution of the beef, the whole cow was in the most symmetrical state. The size of the beef was not inferior to that of the Belgian blue cow, but the quality and fat distribution of the beef were far superior. Zhang Hai's cow looked like it was made of marbled beef. It did not look like a whole cow. Seeing this scene, the audience and the judges were in an uproar. That's impossible. The inside of the beef must be fake. Rosalind Carlyle, who was backstage, couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Just his appearance alone was enough to kill everyone in seconds. Please cut it open. Zhang Hai, who was standing on the stage, heard Rosalind Carlyle's words, but he just chuckled. This guy was looking down on him. Was this kind of beef hard to come by? Zhang Hai was being irresponsible, but he had plenty of it. Hearing Zhang Hai's voice, the chef, who had been in a daze, came back to his senses. He smiled at Zhang Hai and watched seriously. Cutting a cow was a kung fu job. Otherwise, the ancient people of Huaxia would not have created an idiom for cutting a cow. Although the idiom had some mythical meaning, it also showed that it was not easy to understand a cow. The chef, who had been cutting cows for decades, had been specially invited by this exhibition. But at this time, facing Zhang Hai's cow, he couldn't bring himself to cut it. Because in his view, the whole cow was like a large piece of marbled beef. If he cut it, it would be a blasphemy to the beef. However, he could not go on like this. After hesitating for a while, he picked up the knife and cut the cow's back first. With this slash, not only was the neck bone of the cow exposed, the snow-white beef was also exposed from both sides. This beef is at least of the best quality. You know, this is the worst kind of beef. Seeing this scene, the judges were also in an uproar. A middle-aged man, who looked about 50 years old, could not help but shout. It's not just the best quality. I think it's even better than the best quality. Hearing his voice, a woman beside him also said in surprise. If the cow's neck was of this quality, then what about the rest? After the cow's neck was cut open, it was the cow's shoulder. If the meat on the side of the cow's neck was only the best quality beef, then the cow's shoulder could be said to be the best quality beef. The veins and lines on the beef were clearly visible. When people saw it, they felt their saliva secreting at an accelerated rate. Soon, the knife was cut from the shoulder to the back. This was the most tender part of the beef, the top of the head. The moment the knife cut through the top of the head, almost the whole piece of beef emitted a dazzling light. When the beef was cut open, the marbled beef with a perfect flour-like arrangement of fat instantly entered the sight of these people. No, this is impossible. 5A Premium Snow Frost Beef. Oh my God, it's so big. Oh my God, this is impossible. Seeing the distribution of the beef, the people from Xueqi, who had thought that they had won, could not help but shout loudly. As for Rosalind Cartwright of Cartwright, he was already numb after the first cut. He could not imagine how Zhang Hai had raised his cow. This was not scientific. This was impossible. But no matter how much he denied it in his heart, Zhang Hai's cow was still being cut on the stand. As the top of the head was cut open, the essence of the best beef was also displayed. After the top of the head, it was the eye meat. The eye meat was completely different from the top of the head. After the eye, it was the outer rib. Even if it was only 1/3 of the outer rib, it was still the best beef. Only the last 2/3 of the beef had degraded a little, but it could still be regarded as the best quality beef. Looking at such a big piece of beef, Zhang Dihai, Walton, and the other buyers below the stage did not dare to blink. Their hands were trembling as they stared at the beef. This was because they knew that this represented money, wealth, and everything. When it was about 1/3 of the outer rib, it fell from the best quality level to the best quality level. The master on the stand had long been shocked speechless by this piece of beef. Fortunately, the Americans were open-minded enough. After taking a few deep breaths, the master continued to cut the beef. With every cut, there would be a burst of exclamation from the crowd. Zhang Hai's beef cow had a total of 760 kilograms. Although it was larger than the average Angus bull, it could only be considered as a relatively large cow. The amount of meat it produced was also within the normal range. It produced 501 kilograms of beef, which was less than 66% of the total meat yield. However, the quality of the 501 kilograms of beef was indeed somewhat terrifying. With the help of the master and the staff, they lifted a big piece of beef and placed it on the first scale. Best quality beef, 108 kilograms. When the staff reported this number, the audience was instantly in an uproar. Zhang Hai touched his nose gently and smiled. American beef is not as finely divided as Japanese beef. Japanese beef is divided into 5 grades, 5A, and 5 grades. 3A beef was actually similar to the best quality beef in the United States. 4A beef was the best quality beef in the United States. The best 5A beef was the core of Zhang Hai's beef. It was the best 5A beef, the frost snowflake beef. But now, 5A and 4A beef were counted together. 108 kilograms, which was more than 20% of the best quality meat yield. In an instant, everyone was shocked speechless. Most people looked at Zhang Hai with fire in their eyes. As for Walton and Zhang Dihai, they chuckled. They were excited by their eyesight. They could have some relationship with Zhang Hai before Zhang Hai's beef became famous. This was a good thing for them. Best quality beef, 302 kilograms. Best quality beef, 24 kilograms. Best quality beef, 24 kilograms. Best quality beef, 0 kilograms. When the staff reported Zhang Hai's beef, the audience was in an even bigger uproar. According to the average price of 1 kilogram of premium beef, 5 kilograms of specially selected beef was $250, and 1 kilogram of preferred beef was $100. Zhang Hai's premium beef was worth $75,600, specially selected beef was worth $75,500, and specially selected beef was worth $7,600. Just based on this alone, the standard beef was worth $158,700, and the preferred beef was worth $158,700. One beef could be sold for $160,000. At this moment, in the eyes of these people, Zhang Hai's beef was almost drowned in green dollar bills. This kind of beef did not seem to exist in this world. That's incredible. Looking at the prices of the beef on the stage, even Zhang Dihai, who knew that Zhang Hai wasn't ordinary from the beginning, was a little dazed. He couldn't help but clap as he spoke with a serious expression. He had thought that Zhang Hai's beef would be good, but he really didn't expect it to be this good. It was so good that it was a little scary. Could such a number really be reflected by a single cow? He knew that Zhang Hai had 20,000 cows. Each cow cost $150,000, so 20,000 cows would be $3 billion. Even if the highest state tax and national tax were deducted, 35% of the national tax and 5% of the state tax were deducted, that was 40%. If Zhang Hai paid the full amount of taxes, he could still earn $1.8 billion. Not to mention that he was the owner of a manor, and the state would reduce the taxes to a certain extent. Zhang Hai could earn at least $2 billion. Thinking of this, Zhang Dihai felt that his throat was a little dry. It must be noted that Zhang Hai had only been in this world for half a year at most. To earn $2 billion in half a year, he felt that either the world or he had gone crazy. The only person who couldn't possibly go crazy was Zhang Hai. As for the judges, they didn't know what to do. They had never seen such a beef cow before. It was really dozens of streets ahead of other beef cows. 10 points was a perfect score because other people could only get 10 points, but for Zhang Hai, it was only 10 points. If there was more than 10 points, they wouldn't hesitate to give it more than 10 points. That was the gap between them. Impossible, impossible, this guy must have cheated. How is this possible? How can there be such a beef cow? I don't believe it. Just as the judges were thinking about how many points they should give Jiang Hai, Lu Cheng had already gone crazy. Rosalind Carlyle, who was backstage, had already gone crazy. Bribery was rare in the United States, and in order to ensure the fairness of the convention, it was impossible for this beef show to have blatant shady dealings. If the quality of the beef was similar, there might be some favoritism. However, Jiang Hai's beef was clearly dozens of streets ahead of the others. There was no dispute about this championship. It was precisely because of this dispute that Lu Cheng couldn't believe. Therefore, without saying a word, he ran to the front stage while shouting. When he saw that the 10th cow was about to move forward, he directly rushed over. Chapter 246. The security guards were stunned when they saw Rosalind rushing over. They had never thought that Rosalind would attack someone else's work at this time. Their reaction was a little slow, but Belle, who was next to Jiang Hai, reacted immediately. Rosalind Carlyle was just an ordinary person. Not to mention Jiang Hai, Belle alone was enough to put him on the stage first. But Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. He looked at this guy with a playful expression. He probably understood what this guy was thinking. He wanted to cut open the second cow so that everyone could see what kind of special method Jiang Hai used to raise the cow like this. It was raised in such a way that did not conform to the rules of science. Jiang Hai let him do it because he was confident that his cows were good. Although these 15 cows were given special treatment, they were still slightly better than the 20,000 cows. However, the 20,000 cows were also good. True gold fears no fire. Jiang Hai was not afraid that the country would swallow up his manor. If he was willing to let him do it, then Jiang Hai would not care about it. Sure enough, Rosalind Carlyle ran in front of Jiang Hai's second cow in a few steps. He pushed away the staff who were carrying the cow and tore off the cloth covering the cow. With this tug, not only was he dumbfounded, even the people below the stage were dumbfounded. The cow's body was the same as the cow from before. It was covered in marbled beef. Just by looking at the quality, the two cows were almost the same. Such a thing had already exceeded the people's imagination. What the hell was going on? This is impossible. This is impossible. Looking at the bull in front of him, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't help but take a step back. His face was full of disbelief. Although losing to Xueqi was shameful, he could still accept it. But losing to Jiang Hai, and losing so miserably, he couldn't accept it. At this time, the security personnel came up again and put him aside. He must have used some method. Otherwise, the beef would not be like this. Let me go. I want to expose this guy. He must have fed the cow something illegal. While being pulled down, Rosalind Carlyle couldn't care less and yelled at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai chuckled and beckoned to Belle casually. Belle took out the tactical dagger he always carried with him. In the United States, gun control was very strict, but some people were allowed to carry guns on the streets. However, cold weapons like knives and crossbows were absolutely not allowed on the streets. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. For example, Belle, a retired soldier from the Delta State, could carry these weapons. After taking the tactical dagger from Belle, Jiang Hai walked to the pile of superior-grade beef. He gently cut off a piece and stuffed it directly into his mouth. Jiang Hai was not willing to eat raw beef, but at this time, this was undoubtedly the most confident way to do it. My cows don't even eat fodder. My cows only eat the grass in my manor in spring, summer and autumn. In winter, they only eat the hay in my manor. Besides that, I don't even eat corn or soybeans. My cows could be said to be in perfect condition. I even dare to eat them raw. If you have any doubt, you can send them to the most authoritative testing agency for testing. If you find anything illegal on my beef cows, you can sue me at any time. Looking at the crowd below, Jiang Hai said lightly. Rosalind was even more furious when he heard Jiang Hai's words. You're talking nonsense, you liar, you bastard. Looking at Jiang Hai's confident expression, Rosalind roared loudly. The reason why he was like this was because he knew that he was finished this time. Losing 10 million was a small matter. Losing to the Japanese was also a small matter. However, to be slapped in the face by the owner of a manor in his own territory was not a small matter. Perhaps the families overseas did not care as much about their reputation as the families in China. But no matter what, they still cared about face. After such a thing happened, it would be strange if they felt comfortable in their hearts. And if those old men were uncomfortable, it meant that his career was over. In the future, not to mention his current position as the general manager, just the position of the first successor in the future was estimated to be empty words. But at this time, no one would think about his words anymore. Because Zhang Hai's actions proved that he was not afraid of eating the beef. This was the magnanimity of a manor owner. Secondly, everyone remembered. Before these beef cattle were slaughtered, they had to be tested to make sure that there was no disease or something like that. Since the beef cattle could be on the stage, it meant that these beef cattle had been tested and there was no problem. Although everyone was very curious about how Zhang Hai raised his beef cattle, they guessed that he did not feed them anything bad. Rosalind Carlyle was dragged away by the security guards, and the judges gave the final score. The 6 judges had nothing to say. They all gave a full score of 10. As the score was given, the audience applauded thunderously. Indeed, with this kind of strength, getting 10 points was absolutely well-deserved. Young man, congratulations. When the 6 judges raised their hands, the host next to them opened his mouth and did not know what to say. This New York beef cattle exhibition had been held more than 10 times, but this was the first time that someone had scored 10 points. It was estimated that it would be difficult for someone to break this score in the future. Because 10 points was the upper limit, there was no need to calculate it. It was directly a full score of 10 points. Therefore he took the microphone and went to Zhang Hai, saying to him with a smile, "Thank you." Hearing the other party's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and shook his hand. Although this result was not beyond his expectations, to be able to get 10 points for him, it was still a very good thing. "You are too polite. I really didn't expect that your cattle not only looked good, but the quality of the beef was even better. Anyway, the title of Beef King is definitely yours." The host patted Zhang Hai's shoulder. He had seen a lot of cattle over the years, but this was the first time that he was so willing to call someone the Beef King. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled. For him, this was indeed a good thing to be happy about. The next thing was very simple. After this cow was carried away, the next one came on the stage. The quality of this cow was almost exactly the same as the previous one, but in order to distinguish the first and second place, someone gave it 9 points. But even so, this cow still won the second place. Next, all the beef company's representatives came forward, and the organizer gave out the awards. Although it was called an award ceremony, it was actually just a small amount of money. The first place winner, Beef King, was awarded $500,000. The second place winner was $100,000. The third place winner was $50,000. And the 4th to 8th place winners were each awarded $2,000, which was considered a consolation prize. Zhang Hai alone received $600,000, in addition to 2 medals. Unfortunately, they were not pure gold or silver, but plated. Presumably, the people in the United States would not be so generous as to actually use gold to make medals. But after getting this title, Zhang Hai's manner became popular. After everything was over, the New York Beef Show officially came to an end. But for Zhang Hai, after he went backstage, the busiest time had just arrived. With the title of King of Oxen, Zhang Hai's manor returned victorious. When Zhang Hai returned to the backstage with the 2 beef cows, the people from the major livestock companies, who were only interested in him, immediately surrounded him. "Hello, Mr. Zhang Hai. I'm from Truman Company. If you want to sell your beef cows and need a middleman, I think our company will be your best helper." "Mr. Zhang Hai. I'm from Baveta Company. We will help you open up a market in the United States. As for the price, you don't have to worry at all. We will give you the best price." "Mr. Zhang Hai, we are from Lacanas Company." "Mr. Zhang Hai, we are from Aveda Company." Originally, because of the face of the Cartwright Company, the companies that had been a little cold to Zhang Hai were like cats that smelled blood at this time. They swarmed up and instantly surrounded Zhang Hai, constantly talking to him. Hearing their words, Zhang Hai didn't say a word. Maybe for them, this kind of thing was common. The weak were prey to the strong. When Zhang Hai hadn't shown his strength, it was normal for them to side with Cartwright Company and step on Zhang Hai. Now that Zhang Hai was rising, they naturally had to curry favor with Zhang Hai. This was the law of this country, the game of crocodiles. They didn't believe in the law or tears. The only thing they believed in was money. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai was a young man who grew up under the red flag. When he was young, his teacher told him that money wasn't everything. Although it was impossible to do without money, he was different from ordinary businessmen. He was a narrow-minded person. Since these guys treated him like that just now, it was impossible for him to bury the hatchet with these people now. So Jiang Hai didn't say a word. He pushed them away and went to his car. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai started the engine and left with the beef. They could deal with the beef on their own. It was up to them whether to eat or sell. According to Robin's idea, of course, they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to sell the beef. However, Jiang Hai didn't care at this time. For him, the gain and loss of a beef cow didn't matter. This was because he had already opened up a bigger market. Just as he had expected, his beef had become a hit. Chapter 247. Listening to Zhang Dihai's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai smiled. "Xiao Jiang, I got your wine. When will you come to get it? And your tea tree, you can come and pick it up, but you have to sell me some beef." "Okay, I'll be right there." After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai said goodbye to Delina and Marion, who were studying. Then he left home and drove his shield to Boston. Today was the third day after the beef show ended. After the beef show ended, Jiang Hai was harassed all night. There was no other way. All the major livestock companies wanted to talk to Jiang Hai about the sales of his beef cattle. After all, in their eyes, it was money, real money. In addition to these livestock companies, there were many private companies, such as the Xueqi company in Japan. They wanted to cooperate with Jiang Hai to see if they could import Jiang Hai's cattle. Of course, it was impossible. Later, Jiang Hai was so annoyed that he took the initiative to drive to the cattle shed. After staying there for a night, they checked out the next morning and rushed back to Boston. Naturally, the way was the same as when they came. They walked and stopped, but the mentality of Luo Binci and the others was completely different. When they came, they were very confident about their beef cattle, but it was a competition. Who could say for sure? Therefore, they needed to be 30% confident, 20% anxious, and 50% nervous. Fortunately, the result was not beyond their expectations, so they were a lot more relaxed on the way back. Luo Binci, who hardly spoke or smiled when they came, finally showed a smile on his face when they went back. After a long day's journey, they returned to the manor. Back at the manor, they naturally celebrated. This was a very good victory. It was foreseeable that as long as Jiang Hai nodded, these 20,000 cattle would be turned into countless dollars, drowning them. It showed that they were a little nervous before they sold these cattle. They were afraid that Jiang Hai's cattle couldn't be sold. After all, this manor cost a lot of money in Jiang Hai's hands. But now it seemed that not to mention 280 million, even 2.8 billion didn't matter, because Jiang Hai could earn it back. Of course, if it was really 2.8 billion, then Jiang Hai wouldn't buy it. This has nothing to do with his IQ, it's because he doesn't have that much money. Back home, naturally, they ate big pieces of meat and drank big mouthfuls of wine. They tossed around until 3 o'clock in the morning before everyone fell asleep. The next morning, when Jiang Hai got up, even with his physical fitness, he felt some pain all over his body. But fortunately, after running and sweating, the soreness disappeared, but he still felt a little weak. He had been lying at home for a whole day. Today, he finally recovered, but just as he recovered, he received a call from Elder Zhang. With the roar of an engine, Jiang Hai also arrived at Elder Zhang's store in Boston. However, at this time, old Zhang wasn't the only person in the store. There was also a little girl standing there, curiously looking at Jiang Hai. Seeing the little girl's gaze, Jiang Hai also smiled at her. However, this smile scared the little girl and she hid behind old Zhang, still looking at Jiang Hai with a charming expression. Jiang Hai had seen this girl before. She was the granddaughter that Elder Zhang brought to the beef cattle show that day. "You are an adult. Why are you scaring my granddaughter? You too, why are you so timid? You didn't inherit your grandfather at all. You are becoming more and more like your father. Let's go, get in the car." Seeing his granddaughter being scared by Jiang Hai, Elder Zhang couldn't help but glare at Jiang Hai. Elder Zhang's love for his granddaughter was 200%. Although Elder Zhang's face was a bit strict, Jiang Hai could see that the atmosphere of doting was more than anything else. Regarding this, Jiang Hai just smiled. Recently, his relationship with Delina and Marion was getting closer and closer. He also had this feeling of doting on them, which was difficult for people who had never been a father to understand. After opening the back door in the front passenger seat, Elder Zhang and the girl got in the car. "Let's go." After fastening the seat belt, old Zhang also told Jiang Hai an address. Then the three of them rushed to old Zhang's house. When they were in the car, because there was a little girl sitting behind them, the two just chatted casually. After the car arrived at the place, the little girl immediately opened the door and ran into the manor in front of them. Indeed, it was not an exaggeration to say that Elder Zhang's house was a manor. Of course, it couldn't be compared with Jiang Hai's manor, but it was still small. The whole manor was divided into 3 parts. The first part was a 3-story villa covering an area of about 300 square meters. The total area of the 3 stories was more than 900 square meters. Jiang Hai couldn't see whether there was a basement or not. With this villa as the dividing line, there was a garden in front, covering an area of about 1,000 square meters. Behind the villa, there were several independent places connected with the villa. Jiang Hai looked around and saw a swimming pool and a tennis court. In this way, Elder Zhang's house was really not small. At least it looked more like a home than Jiang Hai's house. Are you curious where this old man got so much money to live in such a luxurious place? Looking at Jiang Hai's slightly puzzled eyes, Elder Zhang smiled and said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose. He was a little curious. I remember that you and the girl from the Walton family seem to have some friendship. It seems that she didn't tell you clearly. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Elder Zhang smiled and led Jiang Hai into the villa while introducing his own situation. My name is Zhang Dihai. My father once fought in the anti-Japanese war for 8 years in China. Later, he became an official and a general. However, after the Japanese were defeated, our country also changed dynasties. At that time, our family didn't follow Elder Jiang. Oh, I'm not talking about you. We didn't follow the leader to Taiwan province. Instead, we came to the United States. With the family business we earned in China, we set up the first Chinese supermarket in the United States. Later, it was proven that our family still had some business acumen. Jiang Hai walked while telling Elder Zhang's story. In fact, Elder Zhang's background was quite simple. When he was young, he came to the United States with his father. His father set up the first Chinese supermarket in San Francisco. Because he was a soldier in the past, coupled with a group of loyal subordinates following him, he dared to fight and fight. At that time, the Gray Society in the United States didn't dare to trouble them. They gradually developed and opened more than a dozen branches in San Francisco. At this time, his father passed the supermarket to him, and this brand became bigger and bigger in his hands. Then, he attacked other cities in California. When California was conquered, he began to attack the entire United States. Although it couldn't be compared with some retail giants, the C-Commerce Group had more than 300 Chinese supermarkets in the United States. Zhang Dihai was the current chairman of the C-Commerce Group. He had a total of 3 sons. The eldest son was the current president of the C-Commerce Group. He was mainly based in the headquarters, which was near California. The second son was a scholar, a professor at Harvard University. He was the middle-aged man that Jiang Hai saw before. His name was Zhang Liangkai. Because the old man had retired, he had nothing to do anyway. Instead of staying in California and not being able to see the shadow of his eldest son all day, it was better to retire with his second son. Elder Zhang didn't mention his third son, so Jiang Hai didn't ask in detail. When the two walked into the villa, Jiang Hai also had a general understanding of Elder Zhang's situation. He was the owner of a supermarket that owned more than 300 supermarkets, but it wasn't listed. It was completely his own brand's boss. It was hard to calculate his specific wealth. Jiang Hai already understood the reason why he wanted to buy beef. The things sold in Chinese supermarkets were originally more expensive than ordinary supermarkets in the United States. At this time, adding a high-quality beef counter was also something that attracted people's attention. However, if they sold beef that could be bought in ordinary supermarkets, then they would suffer a lot of losses. This was because the things they sold were originally expensive because the things they sold were not available in ordinary supermarkets. If they sold ordinary beef, then they couldn't sell it more expensive than in supermarkets. They could only sell those that had a price but no market. Jiang Hai's beef naturally met their requirements. Not to mention the special grade, Even the special grade and the best grade beef was actually not very common in supermarkets. After all, this was not the price of beef that belonged to the general public. $50 a pound of beef was not something that ordinary people could enjoy in the United States. So Zhang Hai understood what Elder Zhang meant. Elder Zhang, just say it, how much do you want? After pondering for a while, Zhang Hai was now waiting for a good price, but he knew that although his beef was good, the premise was that it could be sold, and now he really needed some money to go back and forth. The feeling of having no money on him made him feel quite uncomfortable. How much do you have? Hearing Zhang Hai's straightforward words, old Zhang also smiled. In fact, his temperament was very similar to Zhang Hai's. He didn't like to beat around the bush. If there was something to say, it was better to say it directly. I have a lot. There are nearly 20,000 cattle in my manor, including 13,455 bulls, 5,231 cows, and 872 calves. All the bulls have reached the age of slaughter, and I can guarantee that each of them is not much worse than Robin's 1 and 2. Looking at Elder Zhang in front of him, Zhang Hai said seriously, "This is really a big business." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Elder Zhang's eyes couldn't help but light up, and he whispered in a low voice. According to Zhang Hai, even if a cow is worth $150,000, 13,455 bulls is $2 billion. Chapter 248. Old Zhang was rich, very rich. Although his company was not listed, there were always some people in the US who liked to study these things. The people who did the best research established the Forbes list. But on the Forbes list, those who had billions or tens of billions of assets were mainly referring to their real estate. It was the company's stocks and so on. People like old Zhang couldn't be listed on such a list, because there was no way to calculate his money. His supermarkets were big and small, and his net profit was only a few $100 million a year. But if you want to calculate his property, the more than 300 stores were basically all bought. How would you calculate the money for the land? How would you calculate the value of the brand? So old Zhang was a rich man, a very rich man, but no one knew. But even so, if you asked him to take out $2 billion to buy all of Zhang Hai's beef cattle, he had to think about it. If he did, then he would have worked in the supermarket for almost 10 years for nothing. So he had to be careful. Zhang Hai didn't care about his hesitation, because he knew that Zhang Dihai was hesitating. Zhang Hai's beef was good. Almost everyone in the East knew about it after the New York Beef Show. There were many people eyeing Zhang Hai's fat meat. Naturally, some people had a bigger appetite, and some people had a smaller appetite. If possible, Zhang Dihai naturally hoped to buy all of Zhang Hai's beef cattle. In this way, in the next year, they could monopolize the market for Zhang Hai's beef cattle. If they really made money, as the first person to eat the crab, they could naturally make a lot of money. But at the same time the profit was big, and the risk was also big. A $2 billion business couldn't be bought with just words. So after hesitating for a while, Zhang Dihai looked at Zhang Hai. There was a trace of determination in his eyes, but more than that, there was hesitation. I want to buy 2,000 head. Looking at Zhang Hai, Zhang Dihai said seriously, "Okay, but not live. I only sell meat, not cattle." Hearing Zhang De's words, Zhang Hai nodded. 2,000 head. Even if it's $100,000 per cow, it's still $200 million, which is equivalent to Zhang Dihai's supermarket's annual income. For Zhang Dihai, it's risky, but it's acceptable. For Zhang Hai, it's also considered a return of a sum of money. At least he got back 2/3 of the money he spent on the manor. This was a good thing for him. Deal. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Zhang Dihai also understood that it was impossible for Zhang Hai's cattle to be sold alive. This was also Zhang Hai's secret. As for what happened after buying the beef, he didn't care. Their company also had a special plane. Besides, it would take some time to sign a contract for 2,000 head. As for the price of the beef, the two didn't talk much about it. They would talk about the quality of the beef when they slaughtered the cattle. After all, the quality of the meat on a cow was different, and the price was quite high. However, according to Zhang Hai's estimation, even if his cattle were not as good as the one in the competition that day, it would not be a problem to sell a cow for 100,000, so he was not worried. Looking at Zhang Hai's confident look, old Zhang was also very satisfied. Well, the business ends here. I will take you to see my tea tree and wine. Obviously, he had negotiated a big deal with Zhang Hai, which made Zhang Dihai very happy. He immediately led Zhang Hai downstairs and went straight to the third floor. Maybe because of the education he received when he was a child, the roof of old Zhang's villa was not like the Huaxia style, which had a herringbone shape. It was also not like the villas in Europe and the United States, which were built like castles. On the contrary, the roof of this villa was flat like an ordinary residential building. And this place became old Zhang's vegetable garden. To be exact, it should be his small manor. Because as soon as he walked in, Zhang Hai found that the vegetable garden on the roof, which covered an area of almost 5 acres, not only had vegetables, the tea tree that Zhang Hai liked, but also animals. From a distance, he saw some goats and many black chickens running around on the ground, eating some insects attracted by some grass seeds and vegetables. In addition, in the corner of the building in the distance, there were several big dogs lying on the ground. These big dogs were not fierce dogs, but very Huaxia style, Chinese rural dogs, the so-called local dogs. But these local dogs obviously had good genes. They were not small dogs, but some of the meat dogs. They were very big. There were even 2 long dogs that were bigger than Zhang Hai's Xiao Bai. Feeling that someone was coming up, these dogs also raised their heads and glanced at Zhang Hai and old Zhang. Seeing that Zhang Hai followed old Zhang up, they did not care about them, but continued to lie there and rest. After glancing at these animals, Zhang Hai also looked at the plants in the distance. The 5 acres of land on the third floor was neatly divided into 3 parts: the vegetable garden, the orchard, and the tea garden. The vegetables planted here were similar to Zhang Hai's, but there were many more varieties. After all, the people in the United States did not eat many kinds of vegetables. Compared to Huaxia, it was far worse. As a typical Huaxia person, the vegetables that old Zhang prepared were not small. Come, come, come. Let me show you the new things I got. Old Zhang was very satisfied with Zhang Hai's current expression. He pulled Zhang Hai to the vegetable garden first, pointed at a vine of beans in front of him, and began to talk to Zhang Hai. In fact, it's not right to say that it's a bean, because the real bean is actually called a bean in the north, which is cowpea. The bean that is usually called a bean is called a green bean in the south, and it's also called a bean in the north. This bean is the kidney bean in the green bean. This kind of bean has a high yield, and the price is not expensive. A long time ago, Zhang Hai's mother liked to make this kind of bean very much. Now that he thinks about it, it was a long time ago. Don't you know this kind of bean? Seeing that Zhang Hai glanced at it and did not speak, old Zhang could not help but ask in surprise. I don't know. Hearing old Zhang's words, Zhang Hai shook his head. He really didn't know. This is an oil bean. It's from the northeast. Hearing old Zhang's words, Zhang Hai also looked at it again. But it turns out that he really can't see the difference. After all, he didn't buy vegetables before. But in fact, oil beans were indeed very different from ordinary beans. This kind of bean was not as brittle as other beans. Instead, it was very bouncy and contained a very high amount of protein. In fact, the protein content could reach the level of meat, which was 20%. In addition, it also contains 18 kinds of amino acids, and it is also rich in dietary fiber, a variety of vitamins and minerals. It can be said that it is the best variety of mass-produced string beans. When it was expensive in the Northeast, it was even sold for 14 or 15 per caddy. It is not cheaper than meat. Many Northeasterners like to put some of this kind of bean in stew, and the taste is quite good. Now listening to old Zhang's words, Zhang Hai can't help but recall the taste of this bean, and he smacked his lips gently. Give me some seeds later, I will go back and plant them. Just finished a big deal. Zhang Hai wants some seeds. When old Zhang heard Zhang Hai's words, he couldn't help but snort. He knew that this kid was up to no good. In addition to vegetables, there is a fruit area in the distance, but he didn't plant apples, pears, apricots, peaches, and other trees here. These trees are relatively tall and heavy. It's not very good to plant them on the roof, so he basically planted berries. There are blueberries, which Zhang Hai is very familiar with, and blueberries, a local specialty of North America, which is actually a fruit that looks a little like blueberries, but it's not blueberries. There are also mulberries, which are actually mulberries, and some small tomatoes, which are the so-called cherry tomatoes. But what surprised Zhang Hai the most is that there is kiwi here. Kiwi is a plant that originated in Huaxia. Later, in the previous dynasty, It was transplanted by the British to the United Kingdom and the United States. However, the British and the United States treat kiwi almost like cotton in the Tang dynasty. They think that it is an ornamental plant and has no other use until a New Zealand teacher transplanted this thing to New Zealand. Westerners know that this thing is used for eating, but the deep-rooted idea makes few people plant kiwi in the United States. So this thing is very rare in the supermarket usually, but he didn't expect to see it here. I want this thing too. Pointing to the kiwi, Zhang Hai turned to old Zhang and said with a smile. Okay, I will give you two. Don't look at it anymore. If you look at it again, you will take away all my things. Go look at the tea leaves. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, old Zhang's beard was about to stand up. It's not easy for him to get these things. If Zhang Hai continues to ask for them, then his place will really become Zhang Hai's. Sometimes, this old man is quite stingy. Pushing Zhang Hai to the tea garden with the smallest area, which is also Zhang Hai's purpose today. As soon as he entered the tea garden, Zhang Hai saw a lot of tea trees. However, the appearance of these tea trees was somewhat different. They were in groups of 3 to 5 and were planted in different positions. They looked very lush and looked very beautiful. Looking at the tea trees in front of him, Zhang Hai's eyes also lit up. He quickly walked to the middle of these tea trees, slowly squatted down, and carefully looked at these tea trees in front of him. Although he wanted to understand it, it turned out that he really didn't understand it. The tea leaves that had been made were naturally different from the tea leaves that were still growing on these trees. At least, Zhang Hai couldn't see it. Let me introduce it to you. Seeing Zhang Hai looking left and right, old Zhang couldn't sit still. He didn't want to show off his knowledge, but because he was really afraid that Zhang Hai would damage his trees. Chapter 249. In fact, speaking of tea, in Huaxia, people in the north did not drink much tea. The culture of tea originated from Shu. During the Han Dynasty, only people from Shu knew how to drink tea. In the later Han Three Kingdoms, there was no such thing as tea in circulation. It was not until the Jin Dynasty, when the aristocratic families dominated the country's resources, the trend of extravagance and enjoyment spread all over the country. It was also at that time that tea developed. However, the earliest type of tea was boiled tea, which was often seen in some transmigration novels. One had to add goat's milk, salt, and the like to boil the tea and drink it. Drinking it this way was to replenish one's needs for salt, iron, and other elements. It was only during the Song dynasty that people started to cook tea and brew tea like they did in modern times. It was only from the Song dynasty that modern tea was completely passed down. The tea itself was divided into green tea and black tea. Green tea cleared the stomach and brightened the mind. Black tea warmed the stomach and removed the cold. With the opening of the Silk Road on the sea, black tea was also spread to Europe. The British considered black tea to be the most gentlemanly accessory. It was at that time that it was passed down. However, Zhang Hai did not like black tea because he did not like to drink bitter things. Some of Zhang Di's tea was black tea, but there were also some green tea. These tea trees were almost 100 years old. As for the younger ones, they had been here for more than 10 or 20 years. After all, it was easy to bring tea leaves overseas, but if you wanted to bring tea trees, you could just dream about it. These things were all brought over by him a long time ago. This is the West Lake Longjing that you drank. I also got this from West Lake. This is Biluakun, produced in Mount Dongting of Taihu Lake in Su Province, not Dongting Lake. This tea tastes good. This is Huangshan Maofeng, produced in Taiping County of Anhui Province. This is Junshan Silver Needle, produced in Dongting Lake of Xiang Province. This is Liuan Melon Slice, produced in Anhui Province. While leading Zhang Hai, Elder Zhang introduced his tea leaves. To him, these were his treasures. And in Zhang Hai's eyes, these were all treasures. After following Elder Zhang around, Zhang Hai had almost finished looking at all the tea trees. There were a total of 15 types of tea trees and more than 200 trees. There weren't too many of each type, so it was clear that Elder Zhang wasn't lying. He didn't have a lot of tea leaves either. Then I'll pluck some branches and plant them back. Zhang Hai had spiritual energy, so he wasn't worried about it. After listening to old Zhang's introduction, Zhang Hai also made up his mind. He didn't know much about tea, but he knew that he used to drink tea buds. He didn't like tea leaves that had been roasted until they were completely dry, and he disliked fermented tea even more. Therefore, in the end, he chose to get some Westlake Longjing tea, some Huangshan Maofeng tea, and some Amei bamboo leaf green tea. He was not interested in black tea, even if it was the legendary national tea, De Hong Pao. Thinking of this, he directly stretched his hand towards the tea tree in front of him, preparing to pull a section back to raise it. However, before he could reach out his hand, Elder Zhang slapped it back. You can just break it with your hands, do you understand? Forget it. You probably don't understand anyway. Just stay by the side. Elder Zhang glared at Zhang Hai, took a deep breath, took a small knife from the side, and slowly walked over. Everyone knew that it was troublesome to be particular about tea, but in fact, picking tea leaves was also very troublesome. Not to mention the technique and experience of picking tea leaves. Just the time to pick tea leaves was very particular. Take Longjing tea as an example. The best Longjing tea was Priming Longjing tea, followed by Yuqian tea, and then ordinary Longjing tea. Temperature had a great impact on Longjing tea. In the spring tea season, the higher the temperature, the worse the quality of the tea leaves. The lower the temperature, the better the quality. But it was difficult for the tea leaves to grow. This was a dead link. Otherwise, it would be hard to tell whether it was good or bad. According to the climate and solar terms, the tea leaves that could be picked before Qingming festival were called pre-Ming tea. Such tea leaves could be picked with dozens of sprouts, so the price was also ridiculously expensive. After Qingming festival, the tea before Guyu was called Yuqian tea. The quality of this tea was a little worse than the tea before Qingming festival, but it was also much better than ordinary tea. The vegetables picked after Guyu were called spring tea, or new tea, and the taste was average. Of course, this tea was now in the United States. To be exact, Qingming festival was over, and Guyu was also over. The tea leaves now were not so valuable and tasted so good, but Elder Zhang still played with these things very preciously. In the end, under the command of Zhang Hai, a total of 13 branches were given to Zhang Hai. 6 of them were Longjing tea. He also liked to drink this tea. He got it from his father. His father got a lot of Longjing tea trees from China, but most of them died in the first year after transplanting. After so many generations, the remaining tea trees were only left here, except for some in California. But after all, there were still some in stock, so the quantity was relatively large. He gave more to Zhang Hai. Huang Shan Maofeng gave 3 branches, and Amei Xueqi gave 4 branches. Now he was not willing to give more. When they were talking about the beef business just now, he did not look so distressed. It could be seen that these things were really his favorite. After getting the branches, Elder Zhang immediately left with Zhang Hai. Of course, before leaving, Zhang Hai also took a bag of oil bean seeds and some kiwi branches to go back and plant. Although he did not care too much about these 2 things, he did not want to waste them. With a very sad expression, Elder Zhang took Zhang Hai to a room on the 3rd floor. As soon as he opened the door of the room, Zhang Hai smelled a strong smell of alcohol. When he looked up, he found that in front of him at this time, there were many large plastic barrels. Needless to say, they must be filled with wine. Needless to say, these should be the grain wine that Elder Zhang got for him. Boy, you know that these wines are not easy to get. Real grain wine is not easy to get in China, let alone abroad. I got these from an old friend of mine. 3 days after I told you, they were just shipped from San Francisco. Take it as you see fit. 2 barrels for 1. Looking at the wine in front of him, Elder Zhang swallowed a mouthful of saliva. These are all pure grain wine. They are all 70 degrees. The taste may not be as good as those packaged wines, but if they are used to make wine. Thinking of this, he could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and his eyes lit up. No problem. Looking at the wine in front of him, Zhang Hai was also happy. Today is really a bumper harvest. He has a total of 17 deer whips. He is going to make 4 jars of wine, put 2 in each, and have 9 left. Today, he brought 5 whips, so he can take 5 barrels of wine back. Thinking of this, he walked into the room. Elder Zhang is still very particular. The wine barrels in the room are not ordinary small wine barrels, but barrels that can hold 50 pounds. 1 barrel can make a jar of wine. He will take 10 barrels back and take his time. If it doesn't work, it is not bad to make another barrel. The glass jars used to make wine are directly custom-made, so there is no problem. On the top of each barrel of wine, there is a piece of tape, which is written in Chinese what the wine is made of. Basically, there are all kinds of wine: sorghum, corn, rice, glutinous rice, barley, wheat, millet, highland barley. There are all kinds of wine here, but Zhang Hai is not stupid. Whether it is rice or glutinous rice, it is rice wine, and this wine cannot be made. As for the highland barley, it is produced in the western region. Zhang Hai has never drunk it, but he does not know if it can be made, so he does not take it. In the end, he chose sorghum, corn, and barley. 4 barrels of sorghum, and 3 barrels of the other 3. A total of 10 barrels of wine. With the help of the servants in Elder Zhang's house, these 10 barrels of wine are put into his car. Fortunately, Zhang Hai liked to drive this kind of big car. If he really drove a car, even if it was his Rolls-Royce, it probably wouldn't be able to fit in. After the 10 barrels of wine were ready, Zhang Hai also brought the tea leaves, branches, and the like. At the same time, he took a package from the car, opened it first, and put it in Elder Zhang's hand. After seeing Elder Zhang take the package, Zhang Hai said with a smile, "Elder Zhang, take care. Ahem, at my age, it is normal to drink this. But do you want to drink it at such a young age? But is Elder Zhang so easy to deal with?" Hearing Zhang Hai's words, he raised his eyebrows and said to Zhang Hai, "I'm curious. Can't I be curious?" Hearing his words, Zhang Hai can't help but be a little embarrassed. He is really an old man who is unwilling to suffer losses. But anyway, Zhang Hai got what he wanted, and he was very happy. After saying goodbye to Elder Zhang, Zhang Hai climbed into the car, started the engine, and quickly ran home. After returning home, he asked Luo Binsi to come over and help. He put the 10 barrels of wine into a separate room. Luo Binsi and the others were curious about what this was, but when Zhang Hai opened the lid of the sprinkler, they were not curious anymore, although Luo Binsi and the others also like wine. But they like the kind of wine that smells good and tastes good. They are not used to drinking wine like Hua Xia. In the end, they could only retreat. After putting the wine away, Zhang Hai deliberately opened up a piece of land behind his house. He also used a shelf to build a rainproof and snowproof protective shield. Then, he inserted the tea leaves and other plants that he got from old Zhang into the shield. This time, Zhang Hai could be said to have spent a lot of money. He was afraid that these tea trees would not grow, so he deliberately injected a scales aura into each of the tea leaves. Compared to the tea leaves, the kiwis and beans were much more different. After Zhang Hai injected a total of 2 scales of aura, he handed them to Philemon and asked his wife to plant them. Chapter 250. Zhang, Moses Adams is here. Delina Iveline stood at the door and said to Zhang Hai with a Hunan accent. At this time, Zhang Hai was busy in a room. This room was a guest room that he had specially vacated. At this time, the bed in the original guest room had been removed by him. What represented the bed were 10 huge glass jars, each of which contained 100 catties of white wine. As soon as he walked in, the strong smell of white wine rushed straight to his nose. If a person who liked to drink white wine was here, he would probably be very happy. But if he didn't like to drink white wine, he would have no interest in these things. For example, Dusler Gerard, who was the main person in charge of Zhang Hai's wine estate. In his opinion, men were so romantic. Naturally, they would drink red wine. If they didn't drink red wine, they could drink white wine, or at least foreign wine. He really couldn't accept Zhang Hai's white wine. When Zhang Hai Gang brought the wine back, he came over to take a look at it several times. Every time, he looked like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. He looked very helpless. However, Zhang Hai didn't care about that. He didn't have a specific preference, just like how he didn't like drinking tea before. Now, he liked drinking very much. He didn't drink white wine before, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't drink it in the future. In the afternoon after getting the wine from Zhang Dihai, Zhang Hai took back the glass jars he ordered. Then he began to study how to make things in them. Zhang Hai made a total of 5 jars of wine. 5 jars were more or less the same. Zhang Hai put a lot of wolfberries, 2 deer penises, and 2 wild ginseng that were more than 10 years old. In addition to that, he also put some dates inside, because he didn't have anything else to do. Although he looked up a lot of formulas on the internet, there was a problem. There were very few Chinese medicine shops in the United States. If there were, they would be some small unlicensed clinics because Chinese medicine had never been recognized in the United States. This was because it was very difficult for Westerners to understand why some tree roots could cure diseases. If there were elements that humans needed in them, then there was no need to boil them in water. Instead, they could use scientific evidence to extract these elements and make them into medicine. For a Westerner who paid attention to data and science, Chinese medicine was very difficult to understand. Even a few years ago, there were some old people with huaxia who had just arrived in the United States. Because they didn't have medical insurance, the price of medical treatment in the United States was almost sky high. Treating a cold in the United States would cost thousands of dollars, and the prescription was not for cold medicine, but for vitamins and the like. For those old people who had been careful and calculative all their lives, they couldn't bear to pay for it. Therefore, many elderly people would brew Chinese medicine at home to drink. However, when the Chinese medicine was ready, it was almost time for the nearby police or even the FBI to come to the door. This was because many neighbors would think that the family was making drugs, or something like that. Therefore, there was really no market for Chinese medicine in this place. With the development of Chinese medicine over the years, although more than 70% of the people in the United States still couldn't accept Chinese medicine, some Chinese medicine clinics could be opened in some Western areas. However, this didn't mean that it could be done in Massachusetts. Therefore, although Zhang Hai had some prescriptions, he couldn't get good Chinese medicine. He was also a little worried about buying it online. So he was like now, soaking it in Chinese medicine. However, soaking Chinese medicine, ginseng, deer penis, and jujubes together should be fine. Recently, he had been studying these things. Unknowingly, he had been studying these things for 2 days. As for Delina and Marion, since they were Zhang Hai's children and could speak now, Zhang Hai naturally had to teach them huaxia language. Now that they could learn both huaxia and English, it was much easier to learn how to speak first and then learn how to write. So now they could occasionally talk to Zhang Hai in Chinese at home, but once there were outsiders, they still remained silent. This was because they still maintained a state of vigilance against outsiders, and also because Zhang Hai wanted them to be like this. Because now Zhang Hai hasn't figured out how to explain to the outside world about these girls suddenly being able to speak. Including Aphrodite and the others, except for classes at Zhang Hai's place, and when they returned to their homes, they hardly spoke. Moses. Adams? Tell him to come in. Hearing Delina's words, Zhang Hai stopped what he was doing and said to her. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Delina also whistled. After the whistle sounded, Zhang Hai heard a dog barking. Needless to say, the one who stopped Moses, Adams, was Xiao Bai, and only it was the most loyal dog of these two girls. Hey boss, what are you doing? Do you want to make a specimen? As the big dog stepped aside, Moses, Adams also walked up quickly with his slightly Boston accent. It seems that he should have brought good news, so he was very excited, but when he saw what Zhang Hai was fiddling with, he was a little stunned. You don't understand. This is soaked wine. It's very famous in Huaxia. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai shook his head and said to him, Ah, soaked wine, I know this. I recently watched some movies and TV series about Huaxia. I have to admit that there are a lot of things in Huaxia that are difficult for us to understand. When he heard Zhang Hai mention brewing wine, although Moses Adams had a look of politeness on his face, he still said calmly. He had to admit that this lawyer was quite capable. Oh. You also watch Huaxia movies? What have you seen? Rush Hour? Or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. For these foreigners, the so-called Huaxia movies and TV series are nothing more than the earliest Xiongjiang movies. Bruce Lee's generation, followed by Chen Long and Li Lianjie's generation of kung fu stars. However, even when Chen Long and Li Lianjie were at their most successful, they could only be regarded as second-rate stars in the United States, especially Li Lianjie, whose box office has not been very good, and it is not an exaggeration to say that she is third-rate. In a sense, there is no way for these people to represent the mainstream culture of Huaxia. Oh Zhang, you underestimate me too much. I did watch Rush Hour and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon before, but recently I have been watching Zhan Huan. I have to admit that the women in Huaxia are too good. If the women in the United States had such IQ, maybe our president would have become a woman long ago. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses, Adams couldn't help but say, There will be such a day, haha. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Come on, I don't want such a day to come. I also watched a movie recently. It's a movie from more than 10 years ago. It's called Qi Sha. Have you seen it? It seems that this thing is also a tradition of Huaxia. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses, Adam seemed to be interested in the traditional treatment methods of Huaxia and asked excitedly. Oh, that movie, there are some artistic embellishments, but we do have it there. In fact, in the eyes of the people in the United States, Qi Sha, acupoint massage, cupping, acupuncture and decoction, which are very common in Huaxia, are very magical and very strange things. Even at the beginning, these people always thought that it was some kind of strange witchcraft. The Qi Sha movie also talked about such a thing. It was about a Chinese person who went to live in the United States. In the United States, the conflicts between people were constantly intensifying. His son and his superior's son were fighting, and the other party's son was crying. He went up and slapped his son because he was giving face to his superior. Although this was not particularly common in China, it was definitely not rare. However, in the eyes of the Westerners, this was abuse. Everyone was equal. The matter between his son and his superior's son was a child's matter. What did it have to do with the adults? Why did they have to get involved? And because his son was sick, his son's grandfather helped him with Qi Sha once. This also became evidence of abuse. Even in China, because of these small things that often happened when Jiang Hai was young, the court actually directly deprived his father of his guardianship. This was also the cultural difference between the East and the West. However, that was more than 10 years ago. With the changes over the years, more and more Westerners knew about the situation of Huaxia. This was not something that could be explained just by the government and some people who wanted to smear it. But to be honest, they still couldn't understand these things. This there is indeed. When I have time in the future, I will take you to experience it. It is very comfortable. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled, then continued to do his things. Forget about me, but Jiang, I think there seems to be something missing in your wine. I remember that in the things I saw on TV, in addition to the wine you soaked, there were also snakes, lizards and so on. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams immediately shook his head. He didn't want to try it. It seemed to be very painful, so he changed the topic. Yes, there are still a lot of things missing. Snakes, preferably poisonous snakes, deer antlers and geckos, which are the lizards you said, are actually geckos, but these things are not easy to find. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said, I know deer antlers, they are the antlers of fawns. This is easy to get. Boss, haven't you been to the Alabama mountains? There are snakes there. As for snakes, there are also snakes in the mountains, but I don't know what kind you want. I seem to only know rattlesnakes. As for lizards, oh no, geckos I don't know, but when it comes to lizards, there should be a lot of them in the mountains. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said casually, Alabama is a mountain range, and there are naturally many things in it. Yes, you can go there and try it if you can't buy it. Well, okay, I will go there in a few days. By the way, why did you come to me? You talked so much nonsense, but you didn't get to the point. What is it? Chapter 251. Watch your feet. Don't step on snakes or whatever. I'm going back to make wine. And lizards, watch out. Jiang Hai was indeed a homebody, but he was really a homebody. When he had something to do, he was not very willing to stay at home. Ever since Moses Adams reported the bet between him and the Cartwright Company yesterday, Jiang Hai had become a homebody. After the security incident at the New York Beef Show, Jiang Hai took a group of people to the mountain to find what he wanted. Moses Adams was quite reliable. When Moses Adams came to the door to check the 10 million that Cartwright Company owed him, he gave it to him without hesitation. Of course, the expression on his face was very ugly. For such a company, reputation was actually more important than anything else. After all, they were doing the work of second-hand dealers. If a company owed money and didn't pay, or didn't fulfill their promise, then their reputation would be ruined. No other manor owner would sell the cow to them. At that time, they would lose more than 10 million. Therefore, even after paying the 10 million, they directly sent Paul K. to prison. At the same time, they also removed Rosalind Carlett from his position as the general manager. Of course, this was only on the surface. In fact, They also removed Rosalind Carlett from his position as the first heir of the family. It was not because he lost 10 million, but because there was something wrong with his vision. It was troublesome to talk about, but it seemed to be resolved very quickly. But since the paperwork had been signed, the $10 million had to be taxed. After it reached Zhang Hai, there were only $2 million left. Zhang Hai transferred $200,000 to Zhang Hai on the spot. It wasn't a small amount, but for Zhang Hai, it was nothing. In addition to the Cartwright Company's incident, the security company's matter was much simpler. This company couldn't afford to pay so much money. If they pushed a little harder, they could only give the company to Zhang Hai. But what use would Zhang Hai have for such a company? In the end, he said that the money the company owed him could be regarded as a shareholder. They didn't need to pay back the money. Zhang Hai owns 49% of the shares. He doesn't want the management rights. He just wants to use the company's security as soon as possible. He also wants to get a year-end bonus. Although this amount of money is just a drop in the bucket for Zhang Hai. But no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat, so Zhang Hai agreed. Moses Adams happily left Zhang Hai's villa. Zhang Hai kept thinking about what he said about snakes and other things. So that afternoon, he didn't play around at home. Instead, he went to town to apply for a hunting license. Although there were many guns in the United States, and there were many fish in the river, if you wanted to hunt with a gun and fish in the river, you needed a license. If you went into the mountains and fished without a license, you would be arrested. But after all, Zhang Hai was a local tycoon, and he had some connections with the police. So he just needed to report it, and it was done in less than half an hour. That night, he checked the weather forecast. After confirming that the weather was good, he called Xueqi, Clive, and asked her to go to the mountains with him tomorrow. Of course, Delina and Marion would go with him. But when Xueqi, Clive arrived, Zhang Hai found that not only did she come, but her sister Karmacliff also came. But it didn't matter. After Zhang Hai greeted her, he was ready to set off. This time, he only drove one car, the War Shield. Fortunately, the War Shield he bought was a real civilian armored car, and the interior was almost the same as real armor. It was not like other cars, where 2 people could sit in the front and 3 people could sit in the back. Instead, it could seat 2 people in the front and 2 rows of seats in the back. Turning around, it could seat 7 people, and turning around, it could seat more than a dozen people. This mainly depended on whether the driving license was enough. Counting Zhang Hai, Xueqi, Clive, Karmacliff, Delina, and Marion, there were only 5 people, which was enough. Of course, Zhang Hai went into the mountains by himself this time. Naturally, the people in his villa would not let him go like this. Belle was naturally still a bodyguard. Recently, Belle's identity had been gradually changing. It was indeed a waste to let a retired sniper from the Triangle State be a cowboy. Sometimes, Zhang Hai used him more as a bodyguard. But unlike ordinary bodyguards, he only went out with Zhang Hai when he went out to play. His identity was more like a friend than a bodyguard. Usually in the villa, he still worked as a cowboy if he wanted to, and Zhang Hai still paid him as usual. But every time he came back from a trip, Zhang Hai would transfer him thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, and he accepted it with a clear conscience. After all, he did work hard. It was just that the relationship between the two was not explicitly stated, and it was not written in the contract. This time, not only did he bring Belle Lester, but Belle also decided to bring Xiao Bai, Goldie, Dai Teeth, and Chirps. As soon as these animals entered Zhang Hai's War Shield, the originally empty War Shield became a lot more crowded. After everyone gathered at 6 o'clock in the morning, Zhang Hai drove his beloved car to the Alabama mountains. It was now the last few days of April, and May Day was coming soon. It wasn't appropriate to say that it was early spring, but rather late spring. The situation on the side of the road was completely different from the last time Zhang Hai walked on this road. After the baptism of spring, the roadside trees, grass, and wildflowers were all in full bloom. Everywhere was a scene of green. From time to time, they could see some family farms on the side of the highway. Some old people, wearing jeans, were herding some cows and sheep. But unlike Zhang Hai's villa, they did not have many cows and sheep. Zhang Hai's villa had a lot of cows and sheep. As they sped along the road, Zhang Hai also opened the window. The breeze with the smell of nature blew into the car, bringing a burst of fresh air and gradually improving their mood. Cindy Clive, who was specially arranged to sit next to Zhang Hai, also opened her eyes wide at this time. Looking at the surrounding situation, it could be seen that she also liked this place very much. Not long after, Zhang Hai and the others arrived at their destination, the foot of the Alabama mountains. After parking the car in the parking lot, Zhang Hai and Belle got out of the car with a large group of women and animals. Following the mountain road in the parking lot, the group walked up the mountain. As they walked up the mountain, the scene that was originally yellow the last time they came here had changed. All kinds of trees were competing to show their vitality. Zhang Hai did not know much about trees, so he basically only knew a few kinds of trees. For example, red maple. This kind of tree also produced maple syrup, which tasted pretty good. He did not know about the rest, but Belle Lester knew a lot. Under Zhang Hai's gaze, he also introduced them. He introduced Tang Di, Chinese redbud, tulip tree, dogwood, locust, sourwood, deer eye, and so on. Zhang Hai listened for a while, but he did not remember any of them. Following Xiao Bai and Goldie, who had been walking in front, he entered a state of alert. Zhang Hai and the others had officially finished walking the outer mountains and entered the inner mountains. After walking for about half an hour, Belle suddenly raised his hand. Zhang Hai knew that this meant that he was on alert, so he immediately stopped and asked the 4 girls who had been following him to stop as well. Xiao Bai and Goldie instantly lowered their bodies and slowly moved forward. Although Zhang Hai did not teach them hunting skills, the 2 guys had self-taught themselves. The moment the 2 of them crouched down, Dai Teeth, who was originally lying on Little White's body, jumped down from its body. Although this branch rat was a little violent, it was still a vegetarian after all. It was not interested in meat or anything like that. As for Chirps, he has been following Zhang Hai. He grew up with Zhang Hai, so he was both interested in the forest and a little afraid. After all, if he can't fly now, he is actually just a big pheasant. Boss, it seems that we have something for lunch. Belle whispered as he slowly moved to Zhang Hai's side. What is it, wild boar or deer? Zhang Hai couldn't help but ask excitedly when he heard that there was something. Neither, it should be turkeys, and from the sound, it should be a small group. Belle whispered when he heard Zhang Hai's words. As soon as he heard that it was turkeys, Zhang Hai's face collapsed a little. To be honest, he is not very short of turkeys. Domestic turkeys are sold in supermarkets, and wild turkeys are also available in Zhang Hai's forest. There is no need to hunt them in this mountain, but it doesn't matter. It's better to have something to eat than nothing. What's more, in the wild, naturally, they will eat whatever they encounter. Woof woof. Just as Zhang Hai was hesitating about what weapon to use to kill these guys, suddenly there was a burst of barking. In the grass in the distance, Xiao Bai jumped out of the grass for the first time. When he jumped, these turkeys were scared in an instant. You know, in the Alabama mountains, wolves have disappeared for a long time. Even if there are wolves, it is only possible to go deep into the mountains. Now, as soon as Little Black appeared, these turkeys were stunned. Although Little Black was not a wolf but a dog, it looked much more ferocious than a wolf. As soon as Little Black appeared, these turkeys screamed and hurried in the other direction, flapping their wings and trying to fly away. Turkeys may look stupid, but in fact, this bird can fly. Although they can't fly long distances, wild turkeys can fly 500 to 2,000 meters. This is just like a pheasant. Ordinary domestic chickens can flutter on the roof, but wild turkeys can fly some distance. These wild turkeys are the same. As soon as they see an enemy coming, they want to fly away, but can they? Chapter 252. Just as these turkeys were about to fly away, Goldie suddenly rushed out from the other side of the grass like a real beast. Without saying a word, it directly grabbed 2 palms and slapped the heads of the 2 turkeys on the left and right. After seeing it, it firmly pressed the 2 turkeys on the ground. At this time, the other turkeys had almost finished their acceleration. They flapped their wings and quickly flew away. But just as the last turkey was about to fly away, Goldie finally rushed over and bit the neck of the turkey in midair. After landing, the turkey struggled for a while, but soon it lost its strength and weakly hung on the ground. Hearing that the battle in the distance had ended, Belle stood up first. When he saw the situation on the field, he couldn't help but sigh. With these 2 guys, we can save a lot of trouble. Indeed, Goldie and Goldie were really good helpers for him. With these two guys, it was more useful than having two more people. He immediately ran into the circle and killed the two turkeys that were still struggling and hung them on his waist. Zhang Hai also took Xiaobai's turkey and hung it on his waist. These turkeys were their lunch. After hunting the turkey, the group once again went deeper into the mountains. Not long after, they arrived at the small river that they had passed by last time. It was about time for lunch break. After Belle cleaned up the grassland, everyone started to get busy. Shite Clive, Karma Cliff, Delina, and Marion were picking up dry branches around the area. Belle was responsible for cleaning up the camp and dealing with the 3 turkeys. Of course, he also needed to make a fire later, but he brought a fire rod, so it wasn't too troublesome. As for Zhang Hai, he went fishing again. The nearby fish tasted very good. For camping like this, although they didn't do it often, they were familiar with it. Not long after, the 4 girls picked up enough dry wood. Zhang Hai also caught a pike and a perch, enough to make fish soup. When Belle made the fire, the 3 roasted turkeys and a pot of fish soup officially spread their fragrance on the land. After all, it wasn't natural gas, so the fire wasn't very strong, so the roasting process was slow and the fish soup wasn't fast. Therefore, except for Goldie, Xiaobai and Xueqi who were eating the turkey's organs in the distance, everyone else was sitting there and chatting. North Americans, or to be exact, Europeans and Americans, didn't often eat animal organs. Nobody knew why. However, compared to organs, they were more willing to eat meat. Other than the foie gras imported from France, which was considered delicious in their eyes, they didn't eat other organs, such as intestines, hearts, lungs, livers, and so on. However, although humans didn't like to eat these things, animals liked to eat them very much. It was obvious just by looking at the animal world. After hunting for food, animals in the wild first dug out the organs to eat. For example, in a wolf pack or a pride of lions, except for the leader, it was very difficult for other animals to get these things. This was because the organs were soft and rich in nutrients. They could provide enough energy and calories, and they were also very delicious. It was precisely because of this that animals would eat this thing. Although Little White, Little Yellow and Xueqi were not considered real ferocious beasts, Xueqi should be, they would not be against these raw internal organs. After washing, they would be given to them to eat. Jiang, when will this thing be ready? Looking at Goldie, Xiaobai and Xueqi eating happily in the distance, and the meat in front of her, although more and more fragrant, has not been said to be ready to eat, Karma Cliff couldn't sit still. It's almost ready. Let's wait for another 10 minutes. Looking at the chicken in front of him, Zhang Hai said to her, "These wild foods must be roasted before they can be eaten, because as the people in the United States said, wild creatures more or less have some parasites and so on. If they eat raw, it's easy to get sick. Only when they are completely roasted can they kill these parasites and bacteria at high temperature, and then they can be eaten." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, although Karma was already very hungry, she still endured and kept staring at the chicken in front of her. Finally, after waiting for a long time, the meat was ready to be roasted. With Zhang Hai's order, everyone followed suit. 6 turkeys and 6 chicken legs. First one was scraped and divided in an instant, then 6 chicken wings were scraped and divided in an instant. When it was time to divide the chicken, everyone remembered the heroes who caught the turkey, Goldie and Little Black, one for each. Of course, what they ate was enough for Xueqi to eat. Zhang Hai and the others ate the biggest one. After a while, the turkey was basically eaten to the point where only the chicken was left. Eating turkey and drinking fish soup. In fact, this kind of life is also very good. After eating lunch, everyone rested for a while. Zhang Hai and the others first extinguished the fire. After dealing with the fire, they didn't need to care about the chicken racks. This was because the animals here would eat the roasted chickens. After that, they took the garbage they created and continued to walk towards the depths of the mountain. Compared with the leisure in the morning, Zhang Hai and others were much more serious in the afternoon. After all, Zhang Hai came here for a purpose. He wanted to find snakes, lizards, and some deer to get some antlers. But now it's so warm, there's food everywhere, and the deer don't have to run around looking for food like it's winter. They can also have food in the mountains, so they can stay away from humans. So Zhang Hai hasn't met the deer here for so long this time, but the snakes let Zhang Hai encounter many times. Of course, it's not right to say that Zhang Hai encountered it. It should be said that Goldie and Xiaobai encountered it. After they were full, they were more energetic than before. There were a lot of snakes in spring. After a warm winter, not only were the bears hungry, the snakes were also hungry. Even if snakes were cold-blooded animals, it was the same. Therefore, when spring came, all kinds of snakes would scurry around in search of food. It's still okay in early spring, because snakes are cold-blooded animals. If they don't get enough sun, they can't move. But now it's late spring, and snakes are also looking for food, so it's not easy to encounter them in the periphery. After crossing the river, Jiang Hai found more than a dozen snakes in almost an hour. But unfortunately, these snakes are not what he wants. Another flower snake. Looking at the snake in front of him that was held down by Goldie's claws, Jiang Hai picked it up and said with some pity, "The so-called flower snake is called the many-banded snake in China. This kind of snake is poisonous, and it's a good ingredient for making wine. However, this kind of snake is more common in Southeast Asia and China, but it's not in the United States. The so-called flower snake in the United States is a fancy snake. This kind of snake is basically a grass snake or a water snake. It can also be called a cauliflower snake, because it's not poisonous, and it's not small. It feeds on small amphibians and rodents." Jiang Hai is looking for snakes, but not this kind of snake. If it's not poisonous, it's useless to make wine. Some people say that poisonous snakes can't be made into wine, because the snake venom will enter the wine. Whether it's taken orally or applied externally, it will lead to poisoning. In fact, this saying is wrong. Just like Chinese medicine, it's hard to understand how those medicines can be mixed together to cure the disease. Snake wine is the same. Only poisonous snakes can have an effect when they're made into wine. Non-poisonous snakes are useless. Looking at the flower snake in front of him, Jiang Hai grabbed its tail and swung it. This swing is also a necessary method to catch a snake, because snakes only have one bone. This swing can temporarily paralyze it. After dealing with the snake, Jiang Hai also threw it into his backpack. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the four girls who were already far away from him couldn't help but frown. "If you don't use it to make wine, why did you catch it?" Sh20 Clive naturally knows the purpose of Jiang Hai coming here to look for snakes. But Jiang Hai said that he's looking for poisonous snakes. So what's the use of this non-poisonous snake? For eating, snakes are very delicious. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said while looking around, "Hey, you're really abnormal. You actually eat snakes." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff on the other side has already said, "Don't be surprised." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged. What's so difficult to understand about eating snakes? It's not difficult to understand. Snake meat is very nutritious, even more nutritious than whips and the like. Jiang Hai has always liked to eat this, but now in China, if you want to eat snake, even if it's a non-poisonous snake, it's 100 or 80 yuan per catty, which is not a small amount. It's not like here, not only you don't need money, but you can also experience the feeling of catching it yourself. The most important thing is that snakes are really delicious. The taste is a bit like horse meat, but much more delicate. I've always heard that Huaxia people eat anything. I didn't believe it at first, but now I believe it. Watching Jiang Hai continue to search for traces of snakes, Karma Cliff on the other side whispered, "She still has a hard time understanding how to eat snakes." At this time, suddenly Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. He found a small skink lying on the stone in front of him. It's actually a small lizard. He had already checked before coming here. This thing should be in the Alabakia Mountains. It's not so easy to find. He didn't expect his luck to be so good. Although he didn't find the poisonous snake, he found this thing. It's also an unexpected gain. Jiang Hai hurriedly squatted down and gestured to Little Yellow, who was looking for snakes in the distance. He wants to catch this thing. Chapter 253. Skink is a collective name for about 1,275 species of lizards in the world. They are distributed in all tropical regions of the world and in the temperate regions of North America. But most of them are found in Southeast Asia and the nearby islands. The largest one can grow up to 66 centimeters, but generally speaking, it doesn't exceed 20 centimeters. At this time, the skink in front of Jiang Hai is only about 15 or 16 centimeters long, and that's including the tail. In fact, according to this length, it doesn't seem to be long enough to make wine. But this is the first time that Jiang Hai encountered this thing, so naturally, he won't let it go. Under Jiang Hai's command, Goldie instantly lurked. He came to the side of the stone and slapped the stone before it could escape, pressing it to the ground. But unfortunately, it's the first time that Goldie has seen such a thing. Although it's very smart, it knows to hold the back of the snake's head when catching a snake, and it knows to bite the neck of a turkey when catching one. It also taught Xueqi this. But when catching this little thing, it underestimated the enemy. Although it slapped the lizard's body, most of its power was pressed on the lizard's tail. Just when it thought that it caught the lizard and was about to call Xueqi over, the lizard's tail was instantly cut off. This kind of lizard is the same as geckos. They all know how to escape by cutting off their tails. This skink is obviously the same. Before Goldie could react, it had already cut off its tail and quickly ran away. It flashed a few times between the cracks of the rocks and disappeared. Damn, it ran away. Seeing Goldie's cute face looking at the half-broken tail of its subordinate, it was also stunned. Xueqi, who ran halfway, also helplessly smiled bitterly. In fact, he also forgot that this lizard can escape by cutting off its tail. Next time I'll pat your head. But he knows that he can't blame Goldie for this. After all, Goldie doesn't understand this kind of thing. So after Xueqi walked over, he threw the broken tail far away, then patted Goldie's head and said with a smile. Hearing Xueqi's words, Goldie couldn't help but stick out its tongue. In fact, it's also very embarrassed now. But soon, nature gave it another chance to show off. Today's weather was really good. It was a sunny day with the sun hanging high in the sky. Such weather was also the favorite of these cold-blooded animals. After walking for less than 5 minutes, they saw another skink, but this one was bigger, about 21 or 22 centimeters. Xueqi didn't need to say anything, as Goldie had already sneaked over. Under everyone's gaze, it went up and pressed the skink under its claws. The skink was shocked by the sudden attack. It wanted to run, but in the end, it couldn't. It kept struggling. This time, Goldie learned its lesson from its previous failure. This time, it pressed down on its head. No matter how hard it struggled, it didn't budge at all. Good job. Xueqi looked at Goldie's action and couldn't help but run over and pat its head. He grabbed the skink in front of him and stuffed it into his backpack. This thing is different from a snake. A snake needs to be soaked alive, but this thing needs to be soaked dead. After it's dried, it can be put into wine. But with the current Boston area's sun, it can be dried in a few days. Xueqi didn't care about it. It's naturally the best if he can get these things. With this skink, Xueqi's mood was much better. The group went deeper into the mountain. Not long after, they bumped into some rocks and found some skink. These skink mainly eat bird eggs, frog eggs, small fish, insects and so on. These things can be found as long as there's a water source and grassland. It's not rare in the mountains. Therefore, although these things were not as plentiful as other species, they were not particularly rare either. It didn't take long for Xueqi to catch 5 large stone dragons. After that, he stopped catching these things. After all, there aren't many skink species in the mountains. It's better to let them reproduce. Since he didn't want to catch the stone dragon, Xueqi was going to catch the snake. Maybe God heard his words. Just as he walked forward for less than 10 minutes, Xueqi found something. In the distance on the sun, there was a gray guy coiled there. Seeing this snake, Xueqi couldn't help but whisper, "It's a mud ball." His feet couldn't help but slow down. Hearing Xueqi's words, Little He and Little Huang wanted to go up, but they were called back by Xueqi. What a joke. The previous snakes weren't poisonous. It's fine to let the 2 dogs go, but a mud ball is poisonous. If they're bitten, it'll be troublesome. So Xueqi decided to do it himself. He signaled everyone to step back, then he slowly crept up. The mud ball's scientific name is viper, also known as the piebald snake. It's a type of poisonous snake. There are many classifications. It's distributed all over the world. The more famous ones are Viper aculeatus, Viper intermediatus, Viper brachycephalus, and so on. The very famous bamboo viper in China is also a type of viper. The most common one in America is the copperhead viper. It can't be helped. America is the same as Asia. Basically, there are many species, but there aren't many truly poisonous species. The real paradise for poisonous creatures is Australia. Compared to the poisonous creatures in Australia, the poisonous creatures in Asia, Europe, and America are kindergarten level. When it comes to the real poisonous snakes, in addition to the sea snakes, the most famous land snakes in North America are the viper and the rattlesnake, but the rattlesnake's distribution is mainly in the southern area. There are many of them in California. Grabbing the viper's head and body, Zhang Hai happily took out a bag and put it in. This bag is a cowhide bag. There are some ventilation holes on it to prevent the snake from suffocating, but the cowhide is enough for it to bite through. After fixing the bag, Zhang Hai also tied it to his backpack. It's a good start. This makes Zhang Hai very happy. His original goal for this trip was 3: the stone dragon, the snake, and the velvet antler. Now that he got the stone dragon, the velvet antler wasn't particularly difficult to get. Now that there are signs of snakes, this is good news. He doesn't know if it's because this ball of dirt brought good luck to Zhang Hai. He walked into the mountain again. Not long after, Zhang Hai encountered 2 more vipers, but these 2 vipers should be 1 male and 1 venomous. At this time they are cough cough. It's spring, the recovery of all things. Animals also need to reproduce. Sometimes, people even need to have sex in the wild, let alone animals. At this time, the 2 vipers were doing it there, but Zhang Hai went up and forcibly separated the 2 guys. Zhang Hai wasn't going to catch the female viper, but generally speaking, it would take at least more than an hour for a viper to do this. 2 hours is the normal time. This shows how powerful Xueqi is. After letting the female viper go, Zhang Hai put the male viper into his bag. Fortunately, vipers didn't have the concept of family, so Zhang Hai didn't feel guilty. After catching the 2 vipers, Zhang Hai encountered 3 more. After putting them one by one, Zhang Hai's task was already 2/3 complete. It's getting late. Let's go back. However, unlike the excited Zhang Hai, SH20 Clive and the others couldn't. These girls didn't have Zhang Hai's strong physical fitness. They were tired after walking for an afternoon, so Karma Cliff couldn't help but say to Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai realized that it was already 4 o'clock. Can we go out before it gets dark? Although they didn't get any deer antlers, Zhang Hai and the others didn't bring any tents or the like to spend the night here, so they needed to leave the forest before it got dark. Otherwise, if they waited until night, wild beasts would be fine, but some poisonous insects and the like would be impossible to guard against. So Zhang Hai couldn't help but ask Belle. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Belle took out a compass and map and glanced at it, then said to Zhang Hai, "It's good to go now. Deer should also have a chance. After all, the lizards and snakes you were looking for at the beginning didn't have much demand for water, so they kept going into the forest. If you want to find a herd of deer, you just need to follow the water source." However, he also knew that this time, his boss came here with a goal in mind. Now that 2 of his goals had been met, the deer antler and the others shouldn't be too difficult. Hearing Belle's words, Zhang Hai waved his hand as the group walked towards the mountain. Seeing that they were finally going out, the 3 girls couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although they liked to come to the forest to play, it was still quite boring to play too late, especially when Zhang Hai had been catching lizards and snakes. At least 70% of women were afraid of these things, and these 3 girls belonged to the 70%. Since everyone had made up their minds to leave, their footsteps became a lot lighter for a while, but under Belle's intention, they didn't go back the way they came. Instead, they walked downstream of the river that Zhang Hai and the others passed by at noon, preparing to go upstream from here to see if they could find a herd of deer drinking water. Needless to say, hard work really pays off. At 5 o'clock, when the sun was about to set, Zhang Hai and the others found a large herd of deer in the distance. There were about 50 deer in this herd. Basically, they were all white-tailed deer, which is the most abundant deer species in the Alabama mountain range. This kind of deer is different from elk and reindeer. Elk and reindeer have large antlers and have a certain degree of lethality. The moose was very strong, and it was not inferior to the bear in a frontal confrontation. However, the white-tailed deer did not have any special survival skills except for its speed. An adult male deer was 2 meters long and 1 meter tall at its largest, but its weight was only a little more than 100 kilograms or even a few dozen kilograms. This kind of self-weight allowed them to run fast, but they couldn't compete with carnivores. The only thing that allowed them to dominate the area was their strong reproductive ability. Ever since wild wolves and mountain lions became extinct in this area, they became the species that destroyed the ecological environment the most. Chapter 254. I finally found you guys. Looking at the deer in front of him, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. These are the guys he was looking for. At the moment, He also unbuckled the gun he had been carrying behind him and put the crosshairs on the deer in front of him. Antler, in fact, refers to the antlers of deer, but antlers are also divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades. The bigger and thicker the antlers, the better. As male deer age, their antlers will get bigger and bigger, and the same is true for white-tailed deer. Antlers have some effect for collecting and fighting, but they are useless for antlers. The best age for antlers is between 3 and 6 years old. Generally speaking, antlers between 2 and 3 years old are also very good. Therefore, Zhang Hai's target this time was the young male deer. For male deer of this age, no one would care about them. Soon, Zhang Hai aimed at a male deer with antlers about 10 centimeters tall. The August in his hand rose and fell with his breathing, slowly stabilizing. But just when he was ready and was about to shoot, the deer in front of him suddenly became vigilant. Almost in 2 breaths, they instantly exploded in all directions, and at this time, bursts of gunshots came from a distance. Then they saw the deer Zhang Hai had his eyes on was shot to the ground, and at the same time, more than a dozen deer were shot. Those doe that were not shot quickly fled this place after hearing the gunshots. What's the situation? Are there other people watching this herd of deer? Seeing his target being hunted in front of him, Zhang Hai frowned slightly. He didn't care much about a deer, not to mention that this deer was a wild one. To be exact, it didn't belong to him. The reason why he showed such an expression was mainly because he was a little surprised and also a little vigilant. From the gunshots there are more than a dozen people, and there are only 2 men and 4 girls on his side. Anything is possible in the wild, so it's never wrong to be careful. At this moment, Zhang Hai also withdrew his gun and signaled Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai to hide to the side. He also told Belle to protect the other 4 girls behind him. In case something happened, he would be able to react in time. Although the 4 girls haven't encountered such a thing, they probably know that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the wild is not the beast, but these people, so they didn't say anything and just stood there without talking. After these deer left, a slightly dull horn sound came, and then a group of people walked out of the forest in the distance. There are about 15 or 6 people, all of them are very burly, and their looks are basically the same. They were wearing very casual clothes, but unlike Zhang Hai and Belle's hunting attire, they looked more like casual clothes. And the most important thing was that the people here weren't the average white or black people, but some of them looked like Asians. They have black hair and dark skin, but it's the kind of dark skin that belongs to Asia, not black people. They have big noses and deep-set eyes, and they look somewhat like the Mongols in Huaxia. At this time, these people are holding guns in their hands, but unlike the good guns in Zhang Hai and Belle's hands, the guns in their hands are very simple, and the handles are made of wood. They don't look very good. When they saw Zhang Hai and Belle standing there, these people hesitated, but 3 of them stood in front of Zhang Hai and the others, looking at Zhang Hai. The others quickly walked to the side of the herd of deer and began to harvest the deer's skin and meat. It's the Iroquois. The people on both sides didn't raise their guns, which also means that they are temporarily at peace. Seeing that these people don't seem to be hostile to them, Belle whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Iroquois. Hearing this name, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. This is the first time he's heard of it. It's a kind of Native American. The so-called Native American actually refers to all the indigenous people in the American area, not just one kind of human. It's similar to the meaning of the descendants of the Yellow Emperor in Huaxia. Seeing that Zhang Hai didn't understand very well, as a teacher, Xueqi Clive, who specializes in popularizing these things, stepped forward and said to Zhang Hai, Native American was actually not a good term. It was a general term used by the European invaders for all the natives of the American continent except for the Inuit. The famous Mayans, Incas, and Aztecs were all called Native Americans. However, outsiders didn't call them that. For example, the 56 ethnic groups in the country were naturally called Huaxia to outsiders. In detail, they were divided into other ethnic groups, and the Native Americans were the same. However, most of the Native Americans had been massacred in the 16th century. Only a small number of Native Americans escaped into the mountains at that time, or escaped to Canada to survive. However, before 1950, the Native Americans were still the most hunted ethnic group in the American continent. There had always been people who said that the Huaxia were like pigs when the United States was first established. Their status was even lower than that of black people. But in fact, at least the Americans would still hire the Chinese, let them live on the land, and let them earn money to live. Compared to white people and black people, There were naturally 3 types of people, but compared to the Native Americans it was much better. After all, in the eyes of the Americans, the Native Americans were worse than pigs and sheep. Pigs and sheep had to be raised to provide meat, but the Americans killed them. They killed for the sake of killing, that's all. The famous Sioux, also known as the Lakota, Dakota and Nakota, were exterminated just like that. They were so shameless and bloody. The Iroquois had once formed an alliance in order to resist these people. However, later on, the alliance broke up. Most of the people fled to Canada, and some were raised like livestock by the American government. It was not until 1950 that the United States began to officially accept these people. However, these people could no longer accept the United States. They did not need the jobs provided by the United States, nor did they need to integrate into the American culture. They only lived in their own residential areas. Most of these residential areas were now protected areas or national parks. The Americans, regardless of whether it was because of conscience or because of international pressure, divided these residential areas into residential areas. These people were given some residential areas. Without their invitation, no one was allowed to enter. After decades of development, although the two still had an unresolvable grudge, at least they would not fight each other as they did in the beginning. Of course, if the citizens of the United States were killed because they invaded their territory, then their deaths would be in vain. Furthermore, they would not easily attack American citizens outside their own territory. It was a form of peace. Seeing that these people were about to leave after quickly processing the meat, Zhang Hai could not help but look at the sky. To be honest, it was already a little late. If he let these people leave just like that, he would not be able to get his deer antlers today. It was not easy to come here today. He could not come here every day to hunt, so after hesitating for a moment, he took a step forward. As soon as he stepped forward, the 3 people who had been watching him vigilantly couldn't help but be startled. Their hands that were holding on to their guns instantly tightened as they looked at him nervously. However, Zhang Hai wasn't a hoodlum. After handing the gun to Belle, he shouted at the people in front of him, "Who among you can speak Chinese? Oh no, English? I want to buy the antlers of the deer you hunted." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the 3 people hesitated for a moment before they understood. One of them also took a step forward. "You want these antlers? Sure, what are you going to exchange for them? Don't tell me the dollars you use outside. I'm not interested in that." Although the Iroquois now said to live in their own small circle, they still had to make a living. They couldn't rely on just eating and drinking to make a living. They also had consumables, but they didn't have light or heavy industries. The only way to make a living was to use the leftover leather or some handicrafts to exchange for things outside. Of course, they would generally only trade with merchants they trusted. They would not trade with others. Compared to yellow people, they hated black people and white people more. If Belle had said this, they probably would not have cared. "What do you want? We can discuss it." Looking at the people in front of him, Zhang Hai smiled. As long as they were willing to exchange, it was fine. Clothes, food, cloth, steel, weapons, anything is fine. It's up to you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the man thought for a moment and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai nodded. They were going to leave anyway. Other than the skinks and vipers, he could give them the rest of the things in his backpack. This is a tent, this is a tactical dagger, this is a set of my clothes, this is a searchlight, this is a camp pot. Take a look and see what you can exchange for. Zhang Hai took a look at his things, put them in a backpack, and threw them over. All of these things added together weren't cheap. It was about $1,000. After all, Zhang Hai wasn't a real backpacker. He didn't know much about these things. Since he didn't know what was right, he bought the expensive ones. Perhaps the price-performance ratio was the lowest, but at least the expensive ones were indeed better than the cheap ones. This was undeniable. Taking the things that Zhang Hai threw over, the man also rummaged through them. After taking a look at these things, a satisfied expression appeared on his face. He turned his head and shouted a few words to the people behind him. The people who were processing the deer heads stopped. "These things are very good. The quality is good. Very good. These deer heads are all yours." Seeing that everyone stopped, the man also turned his head and said to Zhang Hai. Then he waved his hand and left quickly with the people behind him. "So easy. Hee hee. This time there are even decorations." Watching these people leave quickly, Jiang Hai was also happy. He had made a big profit. Chapter 255. F***CK. You went into the mountains again? And you hunted so many deer? Where's the meat? Leave some for me. In fact, Jiang Hai was not a person who liked to show off. This could be seen from the fact that after he made money, he did not go back and slap his relatives in the face. Secondly, he did not slap his classmates who looked down on him. But since Fu Yuan came, Jiang Hai also liked to check his WeChat. Of course, he didn't say anything. He was so happy today, so he couldn't help but upload a photo of himself, the 4 girls, and a bunch of deer heads. As soon as he uploaded it, Fu Yuan liked it. I don't have deer meat, but I do have deer heads. That's if you can bring them back. After replying to Fu Yuan's WeChat message, Jiang Hai happily carried these things and went to the parking lot at the foot of the mountain. He piled these things on the roof of the car and got into the driver's seat first. To be honest, after playing for a day, Jiang Hai wasn't too tired. After all, his heart was happy, and his body was strong. If his heart wasn't tired, his body wouldn't be tired. On the contrary, he still wanted to continue. If it wasn't for the fact that the sky was completely dark, he really wouldn't want to leave. However, the others did not have such a strong physique, especially the 4 girls. Although they were still smiling, their expressions were mixed with fatigue. It could be foreseen that these girls would be able to have a good night's sleep tonight. As for Belle, although he wasn't as indifferent as Jiang Hai, he wasn't as tired as the girls. For him, this day was just a very ordinary day, nothing more. Phew, let's go home. Let's go to my place and eat something. Then I'll send you and your sister back. Looking at Xueqi Clive, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. With her by his side today, Jiang Hai was very happy. Then I'll have to trouble you. By the way, I heard that your New York beef show was very good this time. The beef in your manor is almost sold out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xueqi Clive was quite used to Jiang Hai's special grade A beef. She liked to eat it very much, plus her relationship with Jiang Hai. She was also very happy that Jiang Hai's beef had changed from the original beef to green muslin. How can it be so fast? This news can spread all over the world in a day. But I don't want to rely on those second-rate companies. And those who have the ability to buy my beef need some time to prepare. But recently, I've sold 2,000 of them. Hearing Sandy's words, Jiang Hai said happily. He really made money this time. Oh, congratulations. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xueqi Clive also said to Jiang Hai in half-baked Chinese. Although the front and back of the hands were wrong, the posture was wrong, and the pronunciation was wrong, but Jiang Hai was still very happy, and the corners of his mouth were wide open. How lonely it is to be invincible. How empty it is to be invincible. But at this moment, he couldn't help but hear music, which made Jiang Hai a little embarrassed. This was his phone's ringtone, but it was not set by him, it was set by Daliana. Jiang Hai was speechless, but Daliana seemed to like this song very much. It's probably Fu Yuan. I just replied to his WeChat and he called me? Because Jiang Hai was driving, he didn't see who it was, and then he picked it up. Hello, is this Mr. Jiang Hai? Do you still remember me, Mr. Jiang? When Jiang Hai picked up the phone, the first thing he wanted to say was, Animal, are you coming? But when he heard that it was a woman's voice, he swallowed his words. After hearing the voice's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. She knew who he was, but she still asked if he remembered him? This made Jiang Hai a little confused. He was silent for 3 seconds in front of the phone. He carefully thought about the person who had his phone number. He was very sure that the person who spoke with a strong accent of the American Empire could not be someone from his country. So it could only be someone from the American Empire. However, the only person from the American Empire who knew his phone number, besides those in the manor, seemed to be Sandy Karev, who was beside him. But who was this woman? Oh, sorry, I'm driving, so I can't hear you clearly. May I know who you are? Since the other party knew him, but he didn't know her, Jiang Hai thought it was better to ask carefully. As for phone fraud, it shouldn't be possible. I'm Pro Walton, Mr. Jiang, you're so forgetful. Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't recognize who she was, the other side of the phone was silent for a second. Then the voice began to introduce herself as if nothing had happened. Oh, Miss Walton, hello, hello. Hearing the other party's words, Zhang Hai also remembered. Indeed, he gave the phone to this woman, who he met for the second time at the New York Beef Show. The relationship between the two of them wasn't close, but they weren't strangers either. At least they had met before. Hello, Mr. Zhang. I don't know if Mr. Zhang still remembers you? What you said about the cows in your manor. Looking at Zhang Hai, Walton said seriously on the other side of the phone. She made this call because of this. No problem, but now my cattle have been reserved for 2,000. If you want cattle, please make a decision quickly. Listening to Walton on the other side of the phone, Zhang Hai also said seriously. In that case, I'll see you tomorrow. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Walton on the other side of the phone seemed to have been prepared for a long time. She said to Zhang Hai calmly, and at the same time, made an appointment for tomorrow. Then the two of them said a few words casually and hung up the phone. Zhang Hai also started the car again. It was really a happy day, and Xueqi Clive, who was sitting next to him, also looked at Zhang Hai with a happy face. She knew for a long time that Zhang Hai's cattle would be successful. Now that she saw that Zhang Hai's cattle were really sold, she was also very happy. The two of them chatted like this, and not long after, the car had returned to Zhang Hai's manor. First, the skinks and vipers were kept in a separate space to be dealt with, as well as the deer heads. Then Zhang Hai and the others had a delicious steak and seafood feast. After sending the Clive sisters back to their home, Zhang Hai also returned home. But as soon as he came back, he found that his two daughters Daliana and Marian were sitting in the living room at this time, looking at the TV in front of them, yawning loudly, but they didn't go to sleep. This made Zhang Hai a little surprised. What are you two doing here instead of sleeping? You're back. Seeing that Zhang Hai came back, the two girls got up from the sofa and looked at Zhang Hai with a serious face, trying to pretend that they were serious. But the effect didn't seem to be very good. Instead, they looked very cute. Looking at the expressions of the two girls, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He walked forward and pinched each of their faces, then put the two girls on his side and said to them, "You two, do you have something to tell me?" Hearing Zhang Hai's question, the two girls looked at each other. In the end, Daliana opened her mouth and said, "Well, we want to ask you, is it possible for you and Teacher Sandy to be together?" Hearing Daliana's words, Zhang Hai, who was still smiling, couldn't help but smile, then he shrugged his shoulders. "I think I should have told you about my situation. I was married in Huaxia, but nothing happened between me and my wife for more than a year. At that time, I knew that we were not people of the same world, so I made up my mind at that time. I wanted to leave her, I wanted to start anew. Then I came to this world, and when I took you in, I used her identity, so I can't divorce her casually. As for Xueqi Clive, I have a good impression of her, but because of that woman, I have a bit of a dilemma." Zhang Hai took a deep breath. In the past few months, he had gradually told the two girls some things about him. But today, he said a little more. He didn't want to put the matter between him and Chili on the two girls. This was unfair to them. But if he didn't say anything, it wouldn't be a good idea for them to continue to be in a stalemate. Zhang Hai wasn't the kind of person who didn't say anything and kept it in his heart. He also wasn't the kind of person who liked to tell others everything because he didn't want to feel pressured. He could only be said to be in between the two. If he felt that he could say it, he would say it. If he felt that he couldn't say it, such as tattoos and dragon scales, they would be his lifelong secrets. No matter how close he was to them, he would never say it. "So, we have a mother in Huaxia?" Looking at Zhang Hai, Marian said worriedly. "Yes, but I guess you won't be able to see her for the rest of your life." Shrugging his shoulders, Zhang Hai was very clear about how big the Qi group was. Qi Li and Delina would probably never be able to see each other. Well, let's not talk about those unhappy things. About me and Teacher Xanthi, let's leave it to fate. At least we're not in love now, right? Haha, quickly go upstairs and sleep. There are guests coming to our house tomorrow. Patting the two girls' heads, Zhang Hai said to them. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the two girls didn't think about their future for the time being. They quickly nodded and ran upstairs to sleep. But just as Zhang Hai was about to go to sleep, two women boarded the plane from the imperial capital to New York. Chapter 256. Late spring, also known as the early summer sun, shines on the earth. Everywhere was green. From time to time, there were some small animals in the grass, but there were more flying insects, which meant that summer was coming. A super sports car was roaring at this time, speeding on the National Highway of Boston. In the world of supercars, people who really play with cars will not drive Porsches or Ferraris. It is because they think it is beneath them. Even the popular Taurus in China is regarded as the favorite of the nouveau riche in the US. Generally, some cultured supercar enthusiasts drive cars that are not very famous in China. For example, Koenigsegg, Pagani, Gombert, etc. Many people in China have not heard of these cars, but many people in the US like to drive them. In some real rich areas, driving a Lamborghini, Bugatti Veyron, etc. will be looked down upon. The car that is speeding on the road is called Rezvani. This is a small car brand in California. It is not a listed company and does not sell cars. This small company only accepts orders and has professionals. So, although the brand is small, it is very popular in the rich circle. However, there are always some people who are not willing to spend a few months to buy a car and let them build it carefully. So, in order to survive, this small brand launched the first car that does not require orders. It is a car that can be bought in a car shop. It is a Buster Beast. As soon as this car was launched, it successfully entered the supercar market. However, this car is not the Beast, but a real car built by a private company. 2 people are sitting in this 2-seater supercar. To be exact, they are 2 women. The woman sitting in the driver's seat has met Jiang Hai twice. Her name is Prawolton. Perhaps Jiang Hai does not know this person. When he came back, he searched Google but did not find anything about this person. But in fact, this person is very famous in the upper circle of the US. There were many retail giants in the world, but when it came to the real giant, there was only one: Walmart. Back in Bing City, the citizens of Bing City had some prejudice against Walmart. There was a saying, "Descendants of the dragon go to the Dragon Tower, only S13 go to Walmart." However, this sentence did not affect the reputation of this company on a global scale. This was also the only retail giant that could climb up the Forbes list. It was even ranked first in the world's top 500 last year. As for the surname Walton, it was actually the surname of the founder of the Walmart family. Walton was the daughter of the current head of the Walmart family and his second wife. She was 31 years old this year and was already in charge of one of Walmart's boutique brands, Sam's Club. There was a reason why Sam's Club was called a boutique store. This was because the things that were sold here were not things that could be bought in a supermarket. They only sold boutique products. It was precisely because of this that she set her eyes on Jiang Hai. Since the New York Beef Show, she had wanted to talk to Jiang Hai about buying Jiang Hai's beef. But as the manager of Sam's Club, she had to consider the company's interests. Nothing can be done just because you say so. Therefore, she specially went to talk to her father these days and even called for a board meeting to discuss this matter. In the end, she got the rights to sell the beef for $1 billion. Of course, she could increase the price further, but she had to consider this. After negotiating these things, she hurriedly came to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't come alone. Sitting beside Walton was the girl that Jiang Hai had met twice, Selena Gomez. Recently, Gomez had not been in a good mood. Her ex-boyfriend, Justin Bieber, was talking about her everywhere. There were also some small celebrities who had been using her for hype, which also had some impact on her work. In addition, the new DJ she found seemed to be a little unreliable. After she clearly refused his private invitations several times, he didn't seem to care too much about her music creation, which made her a little upset. This time, with Walton's invitation, she agreed without hesitation. She really needed some time to relax. The weather here in Boston is much better than in New York. Look at how cool it is. While driving, Walton said to the girl next to him. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. Yeah. With a chuckle, Selena Gomez said weakly. But she had to admit that the weather here was really good. Boston was located in a bay, which made it not hot in summer and not cold in winter. For example, it was now the end of April and the beginning of May. According to Boston's dimension, many places were already more than 20 degrees. In some central areas, it may have reached 25 or 26 degrees or even higher. But here, it was still only about 20 degrees. The hottest time was 1 or 2 degrees. When it was cold, it was 17 or 80 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was not big. Coupled with the sea breeze, it was very comfortable to wear a short-sleeved shirt inside and a jacket outside. Don't think about such messy things. Aren't we just out to play? You have to relax. Maybe seeing that his companion was not very happy, Perwalton also chuckled. She put her hand, which was originally on the gear lever, gently on the tight thigh of the girl next to her. As her hand was put on, the girl couldn't help but tremble, but she still picked up her hand and put it back. Seeing that Selena didn't seem to like this, Perwalton also shrugged. She stepped on the accelerator and accelerated instantly, rushing toward the address Zhang Hai told her. Soon, a gate appeared in front of them. Zhang Hai's manor was originally called Green Forest. However, Zhang Hai was not an Irish fairy, so after he came, he had already reported to the local government during the new year and turned the original Green Forest into Soaring Dragon Manor. Although the locals still like to call this manor Green Forest, Soaring Dragon was already the official name. Zhang Hai also changed the gate of the manor. Not only was it replaced with an electronic switch, but he also deliberately engraved the appearance of a Huaxia dragon on the gate of the manor. When he first engraved this dragon, he almost made a fool of himself because the other party always thought that Zhang Hai wanted to engrave a Western dragon. After all, in the eastern United States, the civilization of Huaxia was not as much as that of the West Coast. The Western dragon was actually evil in European and American mythology. Its main occupation was to snatch princesses, collect treasures, and slaughter villages. They didn't quite understand why Zhang Hai wanted to engrave such a thing, but fortunately, Zhang Hai quickly explained it, so they didn't make a mistake. Otherwise, Zhang Hai's manor would not look good if there was a fat lizard on it. We're here. As the sports car came to the gate, Perwalton also pressed the horn. Hearing the sound of the horn, the TV at the gate also lit up, and Zhang Hai's face appeared on the TV. Hi Zhang, it's us. Seeing Zhang Hai's picture, Perwalton also shouted loudly. Although Zhang Hai was not familiar with Perwalton's voice, after all, they just talked on the phone yesterday, so he immediately opened the door. As the car drove into the manor's parking lot, Zhang Hai also walked out of the villa. I thought you might have a few cars. Is it just the two of you? Looking at the two people who parked the car and walked out, Zhang Hai said with some surprise. These two guys dare to come to my manor so blatantly? You don't look like a bad guy. What are we going to do first? Seeing Zhang Hai coming over, Perwalton put the sunglasses high on her hair and asked Zhang Hai excitedly. Aren't we going to see the cow first? Or the beef first? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was also stunned. Isn't this woman here to talk about business? But listening to her tone, it seems that something is not quite right. What's the hurry to see the cow? If you deal with us for a spot check, I will buy it and cry to death. So we are going to stay here for a few days. Your manor is so big, there is a place for us to live. Seeing that Zhang Hai was a little surprised, Perwalton leaned on the car behind her and said with a light face. And what do you mean? Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai had already guessed what she meant, but he still couldn't believe it. Are all the women in the United States so friendly? No way. Let's play first, then talk about business. Didn't you invite us to come over to play? You won't regret it, right? Seeing Zhang Hai's helpless look, Perwalton laughed and pulled Selena Gomez beside her, and walked toward Zhang Hai's villa. Looking at the two women who seemed to have made up their minds, Zhang Hai grinned. In fact, in Huaxia, they would contact each other when they had time and come out to play when they had time. These words were nothing more than courtesy. These Americans were really honest. But after all, these words were said by him. Although Zhang Hai was not very used to two guests suddenly coming to his manor, he was usually quite bored at home. Now that someone came here to play, he didn't care. Okay, as long as you don't worry, then I will prepare 2 rooms for you. Looking at the two women's indifferent look, Zhang Hai shrugged. Not to mention that they might be his clients, he did say that he would invite them to play. In addition, he was also very happy to play with Zhang Hai. It was better than being bored alone, so he agreed at the moment. Chapter 257. With Zhang Hai's agreement, Perwalton couldn't help but smile. She immediately pulled Selena Gomez, who was still a little unsure, towards Zhang Hai's villa. But just as they opened the door of the villa, they saw Delina and Marion. This pair of beautiful little girls were sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching TV. Unlike other 14 or 15-year-old girls, this pair of little girls usually didn't have many friends. Their previous life made them not very interested in the internet. Compared to playing online, they were more willing to sit in front of the TV and watch paid channels. Their favorite program was talent shows, such as ABC TV's Dancing with the Stars, NBC TV's America's Got Talent, Fox TV's American Idol, and even CW's America's Top Model. Compared to the American TV series that Xueqi likes to watch, they were very ordinary. At this time, they were sitting there watching America's Top Model, which Xueqi has also watched before. But to be honest, Xueqi didn't care much about this program. Although he liked to watch beautiful women, most of the supermodels were, ordinary. Their figures were great, but they were too thin. As for their faces, it was just Although Xueqi wasn't completely obsessed with looks, when a man looks at a woman, the first thing he looks at is the face, then the figure. As for clothes, it doesn't matter. At least Xueqi didn't have such taste. When Perwalton walked into the room, her eyes lit up as soon as she saw Delina and Marion. Wow, what two cute little girls. Are you twins? Why are you so beautiful? Do you want to come to my house to play? As soon as she saw the two girls, she showed her most powerful excitement, scaring the two girls. They looked at her with some horror, unconsciously moving to the sofa next to them. Cough. These are my two girls, Delina and Marion. This is your Aunt Perwalton and Selena Gomez, aunt or sister. Looking at the appearance of the two girls and Pra Walton, Xueqi immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the three people, temporarily attracting their attention. You have to call her sister. Sister, do you understand? This is also my elder sister. Perwalton's face darkened when she heard the words, Xueqi's auntie. She never thought that she was old, but this guy actually called her auntie? Ahem. All right, it's elder sister. All right, you guys go back to your room and read your books. I'll bring your two elder sisters to see their rooms. They'll be staying with us for a while. It could be seen that Daliana and Marion were still wary of strangers, so Xueqi stepped forward to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Xueqi's words, Daliana and Marion immediately stood up and bowed to the two people in front of them. Then, they quickly ran to the second floor. Looking at the two escaping figures, Perwalton's expression made Xueqi feel that it was a pity. Go upstairs. Since you're not afraid that I'll have any bad intentions, you can stay in the guest rooms upstairs. I don't have any guest rooms specially built for guests. The other workers' rooms are standalone villas, and they are already occupied. Looking at the two people in front of him, Xueqi shrugged. At the same time, he made up his mind to try his best not to let Delina and Marion be alone with this guy in the future. That's troublesome. But fortunately, when Delina and Marion weren't around, Perwalton didn't act like that. It was as if she had instantly restored her original aura of a queen. She just nodded to Xueqi faintly. Then, Xueqi brought the two people to the second floor and opened the two guest rooms furthest away from him. Usually, Aphrodite and Marion would come over to clean the guest rooms, so the guest rooms weren't dirty now. Looking at the guest rooms in front of them, the two were actually quite satisfied. Actually, we can stay in the same room. Looking at the big bed in the guest room, Perwalton muttered in a low voice. I'll go change first, see you later. But as soon as she heard her words, Selena Gomez jumped up immediately, nodded gently to Xueqi, then immediately walked into the other room and locked the door. Looking at her appearance, Perwalton couldn't help but smile. Interesting. As her voice fell, she walked straight into the room and closed the door. For a while, Xueqi, who brought them here, became the most awkward person. He really didn't know whether to leave or stay. But Xueqi's awkwardness only lasted for a while. He gave up, turned around and walked back to the first floor. He needed to calm down. These two women said that they wanted to play in his manner. As the host, and one of the two may be his partner, Xueqi also thought about what to play in his manner. Riding, going to sea, fishing, hanging out on the beach, that's probably it. Now the weather here is not very hot. The water probably can't go down. Xueqi felt cold when he went down. These people probably can't go down, so it's almost the only thing to play. If they want to go to the forest or something like that, they also have a forest here. It doesn't matter if they want to play in it. Just as Zhang Hai was thinking about what to play there, the two women upstairs had changed their clothes and walked down again. However, the so-called change of clothes was just changing their originally fashionable clothes into some loose clothes. That was all. Let's go. As soon as they went downstairs, Perwalton said with a smile. Oh, okay, but where do you want to go? Hearing this person's words, Zhang Hai also stood up and asked them. The beach. What else do you have to play here besides the beach? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton gently twirled her hair with her fingers and looked at Zhang Hai with a little surprise. There are a lot of things to play. You can ride horses, go to sea, fish, but you can go to the forest to burn guns, and most importantly you can see the cows. Hearing Perwalton's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but look at her. I always feel that today's Perwalton is a little different from the iceberg lady I saw before. Why is she crazy, and a little chinibu? This doesn't fit the image of her in my heart. Then let's go to the beach first. Ignoring the ridicule in Zhang Hai's eyes, Perwalton said with certainty. Since she has already said so, Selena Gomez has no opinion. In fact, this time she was dragged here. She doesn't care about what to play. For a star like her, a female tycoon like Perwalton, what hasn't she played before? Does she really care about Zhang Hai's broken manner? They came here to kill time and relax, that's all. As for work and the like, it's secondary. Okay. Since it has been decided, Zhang Hai did not refute. After walking out of the villa with the two, Zhang Hai drove a four-wheeled motorcycle, and the two here also drove one in front and one behind, along the road paved in Zhang Hai's manner, toward the beach. But it didn't take long for Perwalton to overtake them. Where is that? Pointing to a small manor on the left of Zhang Hai, Perwalton couldn't help but ask. That's a wine manor. Glancing at the manor over there, Zhang Hai couldn't help but say. Do you still have red wine here? Perwalton's eyes lit up when she heard Zhang Hai's words. Yes, but it hasn't started brewing yet. It's still in the planting stage. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also nodded. He planted these grapes, naturally, to make wine and sell them. Of course, if it tastes good, he will also stay and drink it. It's really a good life. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Perwalton couldn't help but curl her lips. She accelerated and overtook Zhang Hai, heading toward the wine manor in the distance. Zhang Hai had to change his route and followed her to the winery. When Zhang Hai and the others arrived, the head of the winery, Dulce Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements of the grapevine to Aphrodite and the others. For those who grew plants, pruning was essential. When pruning the branches, you need to pay attention to it. Don't cut the head, but cut the other side branches. This way, the nutrients won't be absorbed by the other side branches. More nutrients will be supplied to the main grapes. When Zhang Hai and the others arrived, the head of Zhang Hai's winery, Dulce Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements to Aphrodite and the others. Because if left alone, these grapes will grow into a bunch of grapes on each branch, but the nutrients that the earth can give are limited, especially when Zhang Hai does not allow pesticides and fertilizers. If a bunch of grapevines grows dozens of bunches of grapes, then most of the grapes will not be able to grow. Not only does this consume time, but it also consumes a lot of the fertility of the land, so whether it is planting grapes or vegetables. These old people all have a way to distinguish which are the main places to grow and which are not. If they are not the main branches, they must be pruned to ensure the supply of nutrients to the main branches. This is the inevitable effect of planting grapes. And Aphrodite Arnold, Dinah Taylor, and the others also listened very seriously. Ever since Zhang Hai's rebirth, these women's feelings for Zhang Hai are slowly fermenting, especially under Aphrodite's bewitchment. Almost all of these women's dream lover looks like Zhang Hai. Chapter 258. Maybe it was because of the principles of education they had received before, or maybe it was because they had a good impression of Zhang Hai. In their opinion, Zhang Hai was so good to them that they had no other choice but to give themselves to him. But a few days ago, when they deliberately wanted to give the most important thing they had regained to Zhang Hai did not want it. This made these girls feel a little sad, but at the same time, they felt that they had not misjudged him. As Zhang Hai began to focus more of his attention on the herd of cows, they also temporarily extinguished such thoughts. Of course, if possible, They were still willing to give themselves to Zhang Hai. But when Zhang Hai did not want them, their main job was to learn how to grow wine and how to make it. Dulles Gerard was also very happy to have a group of beautiful, studious, and beautiful apprentices. So recently, he had been teaching very hard. It could be said that he had taught them everything he knew. This made O'Connor Murphy, who was his assistant, a little confused. When O'Connor was learning skills, 90% of the time, he was secretly learning from others. In this way, Dulles Gerard was still unwilling to teach some things, but he was very happy to teach these girls. But as a German, his spirit was extremely tenacious. He did not show any fluctuations. Instead, he continued to do his work strictly and seriously. Just as Dulles Gerard was teaching these girls, Zhang Hai and Perwalton's four-wheeled motorcycle also drove to the side of the winery. The movement of the motorcycle attracted everyone's attention. When they saw that Zhang Hai had come, the girls who were still surrounding Dulles Gerard immediately stood up and rushed to Zhang Hai's side. As for Perwalton and Selena Gomez, they were temporarily ignored. They did not care about the women around Zhang Hai. If there was a need, they could help Zhang Hai find them. You are amazing. There are so many beauties here. Is your winery really used for making wine? Looking at these youthful beauties, Perwalton's eyes suddenly lit up. She looked at Zhang Hai with surprise, but her eyes kept glancing at these girls. She had to admit that the quality of these girls was definitely very high in her opinion. They were quite good-looking, and it could be said that none of them were ugly. In addition, after being transformed by Zhang Hai's spirit energy, they had white and delicate skin and big watery eyes. Because of the labor, their bodies had become tighter and tighter. As soon as they walked over, they gave off a very healthy sense of beauty. The most important thing was that Zhang Hai had repaired their bodies. So now, their bodies were so healthy that Perwalton could not take her eyes off of them. Of course, it's for making wine. These girls have some very bad pasts, but they have been reborn with me. Hearing Perwalton's words, Zhang Hai glanced at her. He was a gentleman, and he had never touched these girls. It's too wasteful. Beauties. We are going to the beach to play. Do you want to come with us? Looking at these girls in front of her, Perwalton's expression changed and said with envy. However, when the girls heard that they were going to play, they first glanced at Zhang Hai. Seeing Zhang Hai's indifferent look, the girls also looked at Dulles Gerard. The old man was soon defeated by the girls' eyes. He could not help but clap his hands and stand up. You have learned enough these days. Take half a day off. Tomorrow, you will start pruning the branches. Hearing Dulles Gerard's words, the girls could not help but laugh silently. Then, they high-fived each other and looked at Zhang Hai with longing. Then go back and change your clothes. You can come by yourself later. You can drive that F-750. Looking at the girls' longing eyes, Zhang Hai also smiled. He would not stop the girls from coming to play, especially when they were not too busy. As long as they could do their job, Zhang Hai was still very good to his subordinates. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the girls cheered silently. Although they could now speak very slowly like Delina and Marion, in order not to appear too sudden, Zhang Hai only told the people in the manner that he was treating these girls, but he did not say the specific extent of the treatment. At least, he would only show it after some time. After all, this kind of medical skill is really a little scary. If it is exposed, it will not be good for Zhang Hai. Young bodies. Should we wait for them or go first? Looking at the girls leaving here happily, Perwalton said to Zhang Hai with envy. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai was a little uncertain about what this woman was going to do. Let's go first. However, not knowing what she was going to do did not prevent Zhang Hai from doing business with her. After saying politely, Zhang Hai turned the steering wheel and rushed in the direction of the beach. As for Perwalton and Selena Gomez, who had not spoken much since they arrived here, they also followed Zhang Hai to the beach. Not long after, the three had already arrived at the beach where Zhang Hai lived. The moment they stepped on the beach, Selena Gomez, who had not spoken until now, couldn't help but exclaim softly. Her scream and the roar of the beach motorcycle also alarmed Edouard Anderson and the other fishermen who were preparing to go out to sea in the fishing port in the distance. Hey boss, are you going out to sea? Seeing Zhang Hai coming over on the motorcycle, Edouard Anderson couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also looked at Perwalton. In fact, It was mainly up to her to decide what to do. No, let's just play on the shore. The sea is not so friendly. When talking about this matter, Prawalton seemed to have returned to her queen-like state. She glanced at Zhang Hai with a cold and arrogant face and said lightly, "No, let's just play on the beach." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai didn't say much and just said to Ai Dehua. Then the three of them rode the motorcycle and came to a more remote beach in the distance. Zhang Hai's manor was originally bought by a rich man for vacation, so whether it was the environment or the location, it was quite good. In front of them was a half-moon-shaped bay. A few white clouds floated in the blue sky. Below the white clouds was the same blue sea. Behind this bay, half of it was a green grassland, and the other half was a forest. It blocked the invasion of the sea breeze. Therefore, when driving on the grassland, one might feel that the wind was a little strong, about level 3 or 4. But on this beach, the wind was weak, about level 1 or 2 breeze. At this time of the year, it was very comfortable to blow on one's body. The beach on the coast was not open to outsiders, so whether it was the water quality or the beach, it was not polluted. There was not even a piece of garbage to be found. On the beach, there was a very good sand. The only thing that would hurt one's feet might be the shells or small crabs in the sand. There were not even any big stones here. One had to admit that this was a very beautiful place. After stopping the motorcycle, the two women also got off the motorcycle. They looked at the blue sea in front of them and stretched. It's really beautiful here, and it's very quiet. Selena Gomez ran her fingers through her hair. She wasn't in a good mood at first, but after seeing the beautiful scenery in front of her, she seemed to have calmed down a lot. Since you are here to have fun, don't think about those things. According to the words of Zhang Hai's country, there will be a way out when the car reaches the mountain. It's useless for you to worry here. How about I help you? Whether it's your music or that little bastard, I can help you settle it. Prawalton also combed her hair, which was messed up by the sea breeze, and slowly walked to Selena Gomez's back. She slowly wrapped her arms around Selena Gomez's back. Just like that, the two women stood on the beach, hugging each other. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai was stunned. What the hell is this? Is this the legendary lace? Boss, I'm here to bring you a deck chair. Just when Zhang Hai could neither advance nor retreat, and the scene was divided into two, one side was very sweet, the other was very awkward, Edward Anderson came to save Zhang Hai. Because Zhang Hai said that he did not want to go out to sea and wanted to have fun here. Edward Anderson thought that Zhang Hai would not just sit on the beach with the two girls, so he just happened to have a few deck chairs in the dock. These were made in the winter when he and Luo Binsi were bored. These deck chairs were not as beautiful as those in tourist destinations, but they were sturdy. Although the white wooden deck chairs were not as beautiful, they still looked good. Together with a box of beer, a box of drinks, and a sun umbrella, it really did look like something. Hearing his voice, Zhang Hai immediately went to take these things back, and Selena Gomez also reacted. She immediately broke free from Prawalton's arms and walked toward Zhang Hai. Prawalton looked at Zhang Hai with some annoyance, and she gently curled her lips, but still walked over. The two women only helped to carry some light things, such as deck chairs, sun umbrellas, drinks, beer, and the like. Naturally, it was Zhang Hai and Edward Anderson who carried them. After everything was done, Zhang Hai and Ai Dehua went back to the dock. Because don't forget, it was not just the three of them here, Aphrodite and the others would also come later. While Zhang Hai was busy here, a taxi had already driven into Winthrop's territory. Chapter 259. What's the situation with these girls? Half lying on the wide recliner, Selena Gomez whispered to Zhang Hai beside her. Zhang Hai was also lying there, looking at the girls in the distance, including Prawalton, who was enjoying it. He took a sip of beer and slowly explained. These girls actually came from a bitter background. They used to be deaf and mute. Because they were misled by bad people, they went on the wrong path. Fortunately, I found them, and then I hired them to help me grow grapes. Zhang Hai didn't finish the details. The dark history of these girls, it's enough for them to know. There's no need to spread it everywhere. This is not his style. So that's the case. I was wondering why they didn't talk or laugh. It turns out that there's such a story. I didn't know that you were a good person. Hearing Zhang Hai's explanation, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. She propped herself up, picked up a bottle of guarana next to her, opened it, and drank it. At the same time, she looked at Zhang Hai with a funny face. Zhang Hai also curled his lips and said helplessly, "Good person is not a word that should be used to praise a man, at least in Huaxia, this is not a good word." Why? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but have some doubts. Good man, shouldn't this be a good word? Well, think about it, when you reject your pursuers, what do you usually say? Looking at Selena Gomez, Zhang Hai guided her to understand the meaning of the word good person. Well, let me think about it. If it was a few years ago, I would say that I am still young and I am not ready to date others. If it was a few years ago, I might say that I have a boyfriend. If it was in the past 2 years, I might say that I want to put more energy into my career. Well, that's it. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Selena Gomez really thought about it seriously and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing her answer, Zhang Hai was shocked again. That's fine, okay? I thought you would say, sorry, you are a good person, but we are not suitable for each other. Shrugging, Zhang Hai said helplessly. In fact, this is the real meaning of a good person. Ha 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 ha, that's something only aunties in their 30s or 40s would say. We don't know how to say that. Wow, your guarana is really strong. It makes me want to exercise. Do you want to try it? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help shaking her head and said. She really didn't expect the answer to be so simple, but after laughing for a while, she found that she was really a little hot, so she couldn't help but sit up and said to Zhang Hai. However, Zhang Hai usually goes down the mountain every day. Today, he doesn't want to go into the water again. Because as long as he goes into the water, the big idiot in the water will definitely come looking for him. When that time comes, there will be a shark swimming to the shore. These women probably won't dare to play anymore. So for their sake, Zhang Hai shook his head and refused her kindness. No need, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Seeing that Zhang Hai didn't want to go into the water, Selena Gomez didn't care. She stood up from the recliner and took off the slightly thick sweater she was wearing. Since they are going to the beach to play, although they don't know if they can go into the water, these girls are already prepared. At this time, on the row of recliners, there is a pile of clothes on each recliner. These are the clothes that the girls took off. They didn't wear underwear inside, but they wore bikinis directly. Selena Gomez did the same. As she took off her sweater, a bikini top that was almost the same as her underwear appeared in front of Zhang Hai. On the left and right sides of the bikini top, there were 2 US flags printed on it. Zhang Hai didn't know what to say. Is this patriotism or not? It's also difficult for him to understand. However, Selena Gomez is a public figure after all. She is used to being stared at like this, so she is not embarrassed. After taking off her top, she took off her tight jeans, and then 2 pieces of cloth and 2 straps appeared in front of Zhang Hai's eyes. Well, this is the first time Zhang Hai saw this thing with his own eyes. Are you really not going to swim? Feeling that Zhang Hai's eyes were fixed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. Although this is only the 3rd time she and Zhang Hai have met, the open atmosphere of the UA made her not mind Zhang Hai's gaze. Of course, if she wants to go further, it is probably impossible, but it doesn't matter if she let Zhang Hai's eyes take advantage of her. On the contrary, this will be regarded as a display of her own charm. Oh no. After all, Zhang Hai is still inexperienced. He clearly gave up on such a great opportunity to take advantage of her. Hearing that Zhang Hai decided not to go down, Selena also raised her eyebrows, then walked to the beach with a smile and joined Aphrodite and the others who were still playing by the beach. As for Perwalton, at this time, she was also fighting with the group of girls. She didn't have the cold and domineering female CEO feeling that Zhang Hai saw her for the first and second time. I don't know if this guy has schizophrenia. Why does she change so quickly? It's impossible to guard against her. But these clothes are pretty good. Zhang Hai picked up the beer next to him, took a sip, and said with some satisfaction. At this time, these girls were playing on the beach. Naturally, it was impossible for them to wear ordinary clothes when playing on the beach. Therefore, at this time, these girls were all wearing swimming clothes. In the UA, except for elementary school students, very few people would buy one-piece swimsuits. He had to admit that these women's swimsuits were very good. Aphrodite and the others had never bought these things before, so when they bought, they consulted Mrs. Philemon and the others, and Mrs. Philemon and the others were all housewives. Naturally, they wouldn't play too wild. Therefore, although they bought bikinis, they were all very conservative. They were of the same color, or there were some stripes on it, such as checks and so on. At first glance, it was a very conservative style. Although it was called a bikini, it was very thick. Among these women's swimsuits, the most eye-catching one was Walton's black one. In addition to the 2 pieces of black fabric in front of the top, there were only 2 pieces of black fabric on the bottom, one in front and one behind. The rest of the body was covered by metal rings, revealing a large area of skin. He had to admit that Walton did have the capital. Her upper body was indeed big, surprisingly big. The demeanor of a mature woman really could kill these little girls around her, but she also maintained her skin very well. Her skin was white and tender, and her figure was also very good. She didn't have the feeling of a foreign woman who was beautiful before 30 and had to call her dad after 30. Looking at these people playing around, Zhang Hai was also very happy. At least he was very satisfied with this scene. As for Selena Gomez, who was still a little unhappy, she also smiled at this time. In this place where no one knew who she was, or even if someone knew who she was, they wouldn't care. She was really happy. The unhappiness caused by her work and her wrong love life had disappeared. Looking at her happy face, Walton was also very happy. It seemed that it was very wise to bring her here this time. Just as everyone was playing happily, a taxi stopped at the gate of Zhang Hai's manor. The doorbell rang. Because only Delina and Marian were in Zhang Hai's house, the 2 girls didn't dare to open the door easily, so they transferred the call to Mrs. Philemon's house. Hello. As the call was transferred, Mrs. Philemon's face also appeared in front of the screen at the door. In her sight, 2 Asian faces also appeared in front of her. Hello, is this Zhang Hai's house? Looking at the middle-aged woman in front of them, the 2 women were stunned for a moment, but the woman with a strong aura quickly reacted and asked in very pure English. Zhang Hai? The boss? He's not in the villa right now. Why are you looking for him? Hearing the 2 women's words, Mrs. Philemon realized that they had come to see the proprietor. That was right. He's not in the villa? Then may I ask, where is he? I called him, but he didn't pick up, so I came here directly. I'm a good friend of his in China. Hearing Mrs. Philemon's words, the woman frowned and asked doubtfully. Oh, he's now accompanying a guest on the beach by the sea. The signal there is indeed a little weak. How about this? Please wait a moment, I'll ask them to send you there. Hearing that the 2 women were Zhang Hai's friends in China, Mrs. Philemon didn't doubt them. After all, this was their own manor. If anyone dared to harm Zhang Hai, they would be courting death. What's more, in Mrs. Philemon's opinion, the 2 women didn't seem to be bad people. At least, they didn't seem to be a threat. With their small arms and legs, they might not be able to beat her. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone, then spoke to Mrs. Philemon through the walkie-talkie. At this time, Mrs. Philemon and the others were herding cattle on the grassland, so the only place that was free was the winery. After hearing this, although he was a little dissatisfied that his work was interrupted, the only one who was free, O'Connor Murphy, still drove a large 4-wheeled motorcycle to the door. From afar, he saw the 2 women carrying 2 boxes standing at the gate of the manor. Chapter 260. President Xi, are all the people in the United States so rude? They didn't even invite us in to have a seat. Seeing Mrs. Philemon directly hang up the TV, a woman who looked younger than her, who had been standing behind the woman, said with an unhappy expression. Hearing the girl's words, the woman standing in front chuckled. You don't understand. The people in the United States take their private property very seriously. If there is no search warrant, these people won't let you in, even the police won't be able to enter. If the police dare to enter, they can even shoot in self-defense. Compared to the assistant behind her, the woman in front obviously knew more than her. After all, she had been here for many years. Barbaric country. Hearing the woman in front say that the people here even dared to hit the police, she couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. At least such a thing has never been heard of in China. Are the domestic police so easy to mess with? Seeing that the girl behind her finally shut her mouth, the woman standing in front couldn't help but laugh. In fact, What she said was mostly an exaggeration. If the United States was really so lawless, then there wouldn't be so many people who wanted to come here every year. It wasn't so easy to do well here. After waiting here for about 5 minutes, a large four-wheeled motorcycle that could seat 4 people drove to the door. As the door was opened, O'Connor Murphy's 5 views, which were obviously unique to the Germanic people, appeared in front of the 2 women. "Hello, are you the boss you're looking for? Get in the car." Glancing at the 2, O'Connor Murphy said calmly, "Wow, Caucasian uncle, you look so handsome." Hearing her words, the assistant's eyes couldn't help but light up. A young girl like her likes these mature uncles the most. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, "Sorry to trouble you." Fortunately, the assistant spoke in Chinese, so the white man couldn't understand. After the woman standing in front kicked her, she said in fluent English. Then the 2 put the luggage on the four-wheeled motorcycle. Then, the man started the car and drove them to the beach in the distance. Along the way, the 2 women sitting in the car had been looking at the scenery here. They had to admit that the scenery in Zhanghai's manor was really beautiful. If they used some high-resolution cameras to take pictures, they could even use it as a desktop without any repair. The blue sky, the white clouds, the blue sea, the neatly arranged villas, the small villas, and the flocks of cattle and sheep that could be seen in the distance, and the forest at the edge. Such a scene was not an exaggeration to say that it was a painting. This Zhanghai really knows how to enjoy life. No wonder he's unwilling to return to China. Looking at the scene before her, the assistant couldn't help but mutter softly. Upon hearing her words, the woman beside her nodded in agreement. In fact, she understood Zhanghai a little. Such a good place was indeed much more comfortable than staying in the country. However, as the four-wheeled motorcycle continued to move forward, the expressions of the 2 who originally wanted to enjoy the scenery gradually changed. The assistant gently nudged the woman beside her with the tip of her elbow and asked in a low voice, "President Qi, is this place Zhanghai's?" "Maybe." However, the woman wasn't very sure. She had heard that Zhanghai's territory wasn't small, but she didn't expect it to be this big. It was beyond her expectations. She didn't expect Zhanghai's territory to be this big. Just when they were wondering how big Zhanghai's manor was, they finally reached the end. The originally endless grassland had reached its limit at this time. Looking around, the grassland was replaced by the blue ocean in the distance and the golden beach beside it. In the middle of the beach and the ocean, there was a large dock. At this time, not only were there several houses built on the dock, but there were also many boats, big boats, small boats, fishing boats, and all kinds of boats. When they were dozens of meters away from the dock, O'Connor Murphy, who was driving in front, couldn't help but slow down, and then shouted in the direction of the huts on the dock, "Hey, AI de Hua, is the boss still there?" Probably hearing his voice, a very strong man came out of the room. When he saw the 3 people here, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. "Hey, O'Connor, the boss is still there." "Who are you?" "I'm the boss's friend in Huaxia. I'll send them there first." After responding to AI de Hua, O'Connor Murphy stepped on the accelerator, and the motorcycle also rushed to the other side of the beach. After about 5 minutes, some figures in the distance and the reclining chairs on the shore entered the eyes of these 3 people. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle, Zhanghai couldn't help but look over here, but when he saw the people riding the motorcycle, he was stunned. He was not surprised by O'Connor Murphy's arrival, but he was surprised by the 2 people behind him. And just when Zhanghai was surprised, the 2 people here had already taken a car and came to a place not far from Zhanghai. When they saw the scene on the beach, the faces of these 2 people were also a little strange. The assistant's face was ugly, and the woman's face, which was originally livid, seemed to have become even more livid. Seeing Zhanghai stand up to greet them, O'Connor also slowly slowed down in front of Zhanghai. "Boss, they said they were your friends in Huaxia, so I brought them here first." Looking at Zhanghai's strange gaze, O'Connor Murphy, a strict German, also felt that something seemed to be wrong. Did he bring the wrong people? But since he had already brought them here, he could only bite the bullet and say to Zhanghai. But after listening to his words, Zhanghai's look became even stranger. "Friends? I thought we would be enemies when we meet again." "I don't like to make enemies easily. It seems that you didn't take what I said to you to heart. You even had so much fun." Casually getting off the dune motorcycle, the woman and her attendant walked in front of Jiang Hai. This woman, at this time, probably someone had already guessed her origin. After all, there were only 2 women named President Qi in Jiang Hai's memory. One was already dead. If she came to him now, he would probably be scared to death. The other one was the most familiar stranger on the surface. Qi Li, President Qi. Yes, the person who appeared in front of Jiang Hai at this time was not someone else, but the most controversial Qi Li, and her little assistant. What can I do for you? Seeing that Qi Li's eyes skipped over him and focused on the women who were playing in the distance, Jiang Hai frowned with some doubts. He really didn't think that he and Qi Li could be considered friends. After all, on the day of the new year, the two broke up completely. Jiang Hai had already expressed his attitude. He was definitely going to divorce this marriage. Even if he had to give up half of his manor, he must divorce her. I came to talk to you, why? Am I not welcome, or do you really want to give me half of the manor? I just looked around when I came. Your place is not small. Smiling at Jiang Hai, Qi Li first turned her head and looked at O'Connor Murphy. She thanked him in English, then ignored her luggage and walked directly past Jiang Hai to the seat in the distance. As for the little attendant behind her, he also hurried to follow. At this time, the German also felt that the atmosphere seemed to be a bit wrong. Although he was a strict German, he still liked the job in the manor, so he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai and Qi Li both spoke in Mandarin. He couldn't understand, so he could only stand aside. It's okay, I do recognize them. They are my friends. As for their luggage, put it in my villa first. We'll talk about it when I go back. Looking at O'Connor's confused look, Jiang Hai smiled. This German also knew that he was going to ruin things. But there was no way to blame him for this. After all, they didn't know Qi Li and didn't know the story between him and Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although O'Connor Murphy did not feel like he was granted amnesty, it was almost the same. He immediately turned the corner and rushed in the direction of Jiang Hai's villa with the 2 people's luggage. At this time, the 2 went straight to the row of reclining chairs, picked 2 and sat down, but the position they sat in happened to be the position of Perwalton and Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez didn't care. Although she became famous at a young age, it was not to the extent that others couldn't sit on the chair she sat on. However, Perwalton was a little surprised. Although she showed her silly and sweet side now, people who really knew her were very familiar with her. She could be the least favored daughter in the Walton family, and she snatched the position of the president of Sam's Club in Walmart without relying on men. How could she be silly, naive, and sweet? She had already sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere when the 2 of them arrived. There might be telepathy between strong women. When she saw Qi Li for the first time, she knew that this girl was definitely not a good person like herself. Qi Li was like a fierce tiger that broke into her territory. How could Pra Walton retreat? Everyone knew that a female tiger was fiercer than a tiger. At this time, seeing the 2 people sitting in her seat, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but raise slightly. She left the crowd and walked over. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked over and stood in front of the 2 people. Tell me, why did you come back to me? Every time he saw Qi Li, Jiang Hai found it difficult to maintain his calm. Can't I come to you if there's nothing? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyebrows raised, and her slender eyebrows also raised. Don't say these useless things. As soon as he heard Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was a little impatient. Hey, Jiang, do you have guests again? But before he finished speaking, Perwalton's voice behind him interrupted him. Chapter 261. Perwalton's words were very interesting. For Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they had different meanings. For Jiang Hai, there were indeed guests again. Because the first guests were Perwalton and Selena Gomez. They didn't know Qi Li, so naturally, there were guests again. But in Qi Li's ears, these words were a bit of a demonstration. Clearly, they didn't treat Jiang Hai as an outsider. That was why they said there were guests again. They treated Jiang Hai as their own territory. Jiang Hai, we can talk about our business when we have time. Who is this? Why don't you introduce her to me? Looking at the woman in front of her, Qi Li also sat up straight. She was originally sitting on the recliner without anything to lean on, but her back was straight. Her arrogant appearance was like a peacock. She squinted her eyes and exuded an imposing manner to Prawalton in front of her. This is Prawalton. He came to buy my cattle. This is Chi Li. She is Huaxia's friend. Hearing Chi Li's words, Zhang Hai also felt that he shouldn't wash his dirty linen in public. Zhang Hai didn't want to let everyone know the story between him and Chi Li, so it was better to stop fighting temporarily at this time. Looking at Chi Li and Prawalton, Zhang Hai introduced them in English. Walton? Walmart's family? Compared to Zhang Hai, who didn't find out anything after he came back, Chi Li was more capable than him. As soon as she heard this surname, she had already reacted immediately and asked with some surprise. Oh, you know me. Hello. Hearing that Chi Li knew her surname, Prawalton chuckled. She didn't mind Zhang Hai saying that she was here to buy cattle. Indeed, she was here to buy cattle. However, her eyes kept glancing at Zhang Hai and Lu Li. Her sixth sense told her that there must be a story between these two guys. Even Zhang Hai was a little afraid of this woman, which made her more interested in the story. Although she had only met Zhang Hai 3 times, she had some understanding of him. This guy was a reckless and overconfident maniac. When he didn't understand the rules of the New York beef show, he dared to spend more than $1 million to participate. Fortunately, he won in the end and made a name for himself. However, only they knew how lucky they were. If it wasn't for Selena Gomez, if it wasn't for her, then Zhang Hai wouldn't even be able to pass the first round. Although his beef was indeed good, his confidence was a little too much. At the same time, this guy was also a reckless person. It was rare to see someone wearing outdoor clothing to participate in the NBA All-Star reception. It was this kind of person who had 2 personalities. The first impression he gave people was that he was stubborn, and the second impression was that he was stubborn. As long as he set his mind on something, then he would definitely do it. This was also called bigotry. It was hard to imagine that such a person would have anything to be afraid of. However, it was clear that this woman named Chi Li gave Zhang Hai a very dangerous signal. This made him constantly on guard against her, which made her very interested in Chi Li. Hello, you are the famous Walton family and the Walmart Group. How could I not know? However, I am a little surprised. If you are just here to buy beef, then you don't have to come here personally to buy it. Although Chi Li felt a little pressured by the other party's identity, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. She straightened her clothes and spoke to Walton with a serious face. If it was ordinary beef, then I naturally wouldn't have to come here personally. However, your friend's beef is not ordinary beef. If I didn't come here personally to inspect it, I think our group wouldn't be at ease. After hearing Chi Li's words, Prawalton also spoke lightly. Although the 2 of them spoke very softly at this time, there was also a smile on his face, but Zhang Hai, who had been standing between the 2 of them, felt that the weather had begun to heat up for no reason. What's going on? If this was the world of anime at this time, the sky would probably be cut open by this momentum. Of course, this was just Zhang Hai's imagination. Then the 2 of them spoke one after another. Although they were smiling like flowers, there was a sense of tit-for-tat between their words. Zhang Hai wanted to interrupt several times, but just as he opened his mouth, the 2 of them had already started talking fiercely. In terms of momentum, she really crushed Zhang Hai dozens of times. But what also surprised Zhang Hai was that Chi Li didn't fall behind. After all, Prawalton's strength was there. In the Walmart family, she was able to manage Sam's Club alone. From this, it can be seen that this woman was definitely not simple. However, Chi Li only took over the family company for a year. In a year's time, she was able to be on par with Prawalton, which really surprised Zhang Hai. Hey, Zhang Hai, your sea is so beautiful. There are so many animals. Have you ever thought of developing it as a tourist area? At this time, suddenly, Selena Gomez in the distance ran over with a sea urchin in her hand. Just now, she took advantage of the fact that everyone was playing and snorkeling in the sea. The sun penetrated the sea and shone on the shallows. When people dive underwater, the colorful coral reefs and dreamy marine life will surprise them. But unfortunately, although Selena Gomez can swim, her swimming skills are not good. At least she can't catch fish with her hands, so in the end, she only picked up a sea urchin and floated up. But don't get me wrong, people in Europe and the United States don't eat this sea urchin. This sea urchin is actually used to feed lobsters and crabs in the sea. Of course, some more precious fish, such as parrotfish, will also eat this thing. However, on Zhang Hai's coast, This thing is really too much. Even Jiang Hai doesn't like to eat it. You don't like to eat this thing, do you? Looking at Selena Gomez, who came over with a sea urchin, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Of course no, I like to eat meat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand to deny it. By the way, it's almost dark. What do you want to eat? I'll get it for you. But her words made Jiang Hai slap his forehead. Originally, he was a little overwhelmed here. Now that Qi Li is here, he probably won't have the time and opportunity to watch the girls play. Instead, it's better to leave here and find something to eat. I came here to check your beef, of course I want to eat beef. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton said with a smile. No problem, what about you? Seeing that Prawalton has already ordered, Jiang Hai also looked at the others. I've been on a diet recently. Although the beef is good, the calories are still a bit high. It would be better if there is fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. As a public figure, she naturally needs to control her body shape. Meat is not something that can be eaten casually. I don't care. When it comes to Qi Li is also a bachelor. To be honest, she doesn't know what Jiang Hai has here, so she said very indifferently. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai can't help but curl his lips. Indifference is actually the most difficult thing to accept. Okay, then you can rest here first. In a while, you can take my four-wheeled motorcycle back. Aphrodite and the others know the way. I'll get you something to eat. At the moment, Jiang Hai didn't say much and directly turned around and ran toward the distant dock. After Jiang Hai turned around and left, the two women who had been talking happily when Jiang Hai was still here, suddenly stopped talking. At this moment, Prawalton pointed at her clothes on the recliner. Qi Li naturally knew what she meant, but she didn't move away and just sat on the side. Seeing Qi Li's movement, Prawalton also chuckled, picked up her clothes and towel, and directly lay on Jiang Hai's recliner. Then the two of them, one lying down and one sitting, motionlessly looked at the blue sky, white clouds, blue sea, and golden beach. This atmosphere made Selena Gomez a little uncomfortable. She quickly returned to Aphrodite's side and played with the girls. As for Qi Li's assistant, she wasn't so lucky. She could only stand beside Qi Li. Although it was very comfortable here, the pressure in front of the two tigresses, oh no, the strong women, made her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to care about this little assistant. In fact, even if he could, he was too lazy to care. After all, the person who despised him the most was this woman. Jiang Hai felt very comfortable letting her suffer. When they arrived at the dock, Jiang Hai steered a boat and left the dock. After arriving at the junction of the coral reef and the fish farm, Jiang Hai took off his clothes and dived into the sea. As Jiang Hai dived into the water, a black figure quickly swam over. Ever since Jiang Hai leveled up, he wasn't as cautious about using the spiritual energy in the scales as he was in the beginning. These days, in addition to using the spiritual energy in the scales for his pets, Little Yellow, Xiaobai, Chirp, Bucktooth, and Little Xia, he also gave Big Fool, his bodyguard, 2 extra pieces of spiritual energy. Once these 2 pieces of spiritual energy were injected, Big Fool's IQ and size were now rising in a straight line. The sand tiger shark, which was originally only 4 or 5 meters long, had grown to more than 8 meters long at this time, which was longer than the average great white shark. However, because of the transformation of spiritual energy, its teeth were sharper, faster, and stronger. Even if it really encountered a great white shark, it could still teach the great white shark a lesson. At this time in the sea, the only thing that could compete with it might be the killer whale. It wasn't because the killer whale was strong, but because it was a group of creatures. Jiang Hai patted its head. He didn't have time to play with it today. He paddled and dived into the deep sea. Chapter 262. Bang! With a splash of water, Jiang Hai also dived into the water. Big Idiot sensed his presence and immediately swam over to him from his territory. The way it shook its head and wagged its tail did look a little scary, but Jiang Hai knew very well that this guy was actually acting cute. It was hard to understand how a shark would act cute, but it did look scary. Pointing at the bottom of the sea, Jiang Hai grabbed Big Idiot's dorsal fin with both hands. As Big Idiot swung its tail, It instantly dived into the depths of the sea at a speed much faster than Zhang Hai's swimming speed. When it was about to reach the bottom, Zhang Hai let go of his hand and landed on the seabed. The fine sand on the seabed sank a lot when Zhang Hai stepped on it. Some flatfish that were originally hiding in the sand nearby immediately swam away after sensing Zhang Hai's presence. As for Zhang Hai, he stabilized his body and walked towards the coral reef. There are some dangers in the coral reefs. For example, there are some silly eels, silly sea snakes, sea anemones, poisonous fish, jellyfish, and the like. All of them are very dangerous. However, Zhang Hai already had some understanding of these dangers. At least, he cherishes his life, so he wouldn't play around with his own life. The marine resources in Zhang Hai's territory were indeed quite rich. Whether it was fish, shellfish, lobsters or crabs, if he wanted to eat them himself, he wouldn't be able to finish them in his lifetime. But if he caught them and sold them, it would definitely not be enough. Fortunately, Zhang Hai didn't intend to touch the coral reef. This area was also considered his conservation area. If there were any precious fish species in the future, he could breed them here. As for the outer sea, it was for breeding the economic fish. After calculating in his heart, Zhang Hai counted the people who would be eating dinner tonight. Although Aphrodite and the others were playing here, they would probably have to go back when it was time for dinner. That meant that the people eating at his house would be himself, Delina, Marion, Perwalton, Selena Gomez, Chile, and her little assistant. Well, actually, the assistant couldn't be blamed for looking down on Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai also looked down on her. Even now, Zhang Hai still didn't know her name. There are a total of 7 people. In addition to steak, I'll get some fish, abalones, sea cucumbers, and lobsters. Forget about crabs. After calculating in his heart, Zhang Hai took out the knife at his waist and headed for the coral reef. In fact, abalones were very easy to breed, especially when the seawater was very clear. Breeding abalones basically required a lot of seaweed, rich bait, clear water early, stable seawater density, rocks on the bottom, no industrial pollution in the sea area, and fewer hostile creatures. It wouldn't be frozen in winter, so it was best to breed abalones in a frozen place. The temperature requirements for this thing weren't too high. For example, the Bohai Bend and the Huanghai Bay near Lu Province could also be bred. To be honest, the temperature in Boston was much warmer than the Bohai Bay in China. The highest temperature in summer didn't exceed 30 degrees, and the coldest time in winter didn't exceed -10 degrees. It was basically about the same as in Lu Province. It was a good place to breed abalones. However, it was still the same saying. In fact, people in Europe and America weren't very interested in abalones. Take the most famous Australian abalones for example. In fact, the locals didn't eat them very much. In some public beaches, you could go into the water and catch them to eat. Of course, if you wanted to take them away, you had to limit the number of abalones. Basically, each person could only take a few abalones. It was okay to take them back for fun, but it wasn't good to eat them. In some protected parks and lakes in Australia, these large abalones could grow to 3 or even 2 heads. However, they weren't allowed to be harvested, but the locals didn't eat them either. Raising lobsters in the United States could make money, but raising abalones? Haha, you'll lose a lot of money. Perwalton naturally didn't come here to eat abalones. However, in China, abalones were still quite popular. The average size sold for about 20 renminbi each, and the seaside sold for about 10 renminbi. The large ones that Zhang Hai picked could be sold for a few hundred RMB per kilogram at the seaside in China. It was naturally more expensive if he went to a restaurant. The reason why he picked these abalones wasn't because he didn't want to show off. He just wanted to tell Chile, don't think that he, Zhang Hai, is not doing well abroad. He is doing much better here than you. The blue sky, white clouds, no pressure, lobsters, steaks, and large abalones couldn't be enjoyed in China. With this kind of mood, Zhang Hai soon scooped up about 20 abalones from the reef in front of him. Although abalones were the most abundant in the Pacific Ocean, followed by the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't a problem to get hundreds or thousands of abalones in such a big sea. What? Arctic Ocean? Sorry, there wasn't any abalones there. Zhang Hai quickly picked up more than 20 abalones, then swam to the depths and grabbed some lobsters. Lobsters and abalones were the same. Their size determined their fate. The The large ones were naturally very expensive, and the small ones weren't worth much. Lobsters that weighed about 2 to 3 kilograms were only around 10 renminbi per kilogram here. Sometimes, one could even buy a kilogram for less than 10 renminbi. Zhang Hai wanted to show off and treat people, so he naturally couldn't get ordinary lobsters. Therefore, he specially picked 2 large ones. Boston lobsters might not be as big as Australian lobsters, but the meat of Boston lobsters was much thicker than that of Australian lobsters. The meat in the 2 big pincers was extraordinarily thick, and the taste was naturally excellent. Zhang Hai picked 2 lobsters that weighed about 10 kilograms and held them in his hands. They weighed about 12 to 1.5 kilograms and were more than 1 meter long. In the sea, they were definitely big monsters. Compared to abalones, lobsters were much more abundant in this sea area. Most of them were wild, and some of them were shrimp seedlings that Zhang Hai threw away. Because Zhang Hai injected spirit energy into them before throwing them away, almost none of them died of illness. Of course, those that were eaten were counted separately, but this was also considered the survival of the fittest in nature. After catching the abalones and lobsters, Zhang Hai picked up some sea cucumbers from the bottom of the sea. There were really a lot of sea cucumbers at the bottom of the sea. Zhang Hai casually picked a dozen big ones, then gestured to Big Idiot, who was hovering above his head in the distance. Big Idiot quickly swam towards the depths of the coral reef. After a few seconds, the originally quiet coral reef suddenly became lively. Big Idiot was chasing a big fish at this time and was rushing towards Zhang Hai. However, it was obvious that the fish in front of Big Idiot wasn't swimming fast. The reason why Big Idiot didn't catch it was to let Zhang Hai catch it. It couldn't be helped. Although Zhang Hai wasn't afraid of water at this time, it didn't mean that he could catch the fish in the water. At least, it was still difficult for him to catch most of the fish with his bare hands. But Big Idiot didn't care, he could catch it. When the fish swam not far from Zhang Hai had already stretched out his hand. Although he couldn't chase Zhang Hai in a straight line, he could catch it with his hands. Zhang Hai's right thumb, index finger, and middle finger instantly grabbed the fish's gills and mouth. The fish was already in his hands. After getting it, Zhang Hai observed the fish. This was a spotted grouper, which was originally distributed in tropical waters, both in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The largest body length was 1 meter. It mainly lived along the rocky reef areas where the water quality was relatively turbid, but it was often found in the soda water area. It was fierce and belonged to the ambush-type fish. It was very popular in China. Originally, it was rare in the Atlantic region of the United States. To be precise, in the Atlantic Ocean, even groupers were rare. But in recent years, there had been a lot of breeding. Although it wasn't to the extent that you could see fish in the cold zone of the tropics, fish in the cold zone of the tropics were still quite common. The spotted grouper caught by Zhang Hai was about 80 centimeters long. It was indeed not a small fish. Zhang Hai glanced at his watch. It wasn't his Patek Philippe anymore. That watch was good, but it wouldn't work in the water. It could only withstand up to 30 meters of water. Therefore, Zhang Hai deliberately bought a diving watch. This one was much cheaper. Rolex, well, it was actually cheap, but it was only compared to Zhang Hai's original watch. Rolex Deep SA, Deep Sea, with a maximum diving depth of 3,900 meters, a purebred diving watch. Because it was custom-made, the price was $128,000, which was less than 1 million RMB, but it was very expensive in China. Compared with the gorgeous shape of Patek Philippe, Zhang Hai actually preferred this kind of sports type. Moreover, for the current him, the bottom of the sea above 3,900 meters was not something he could easily set foot in. Not to mention 3,900 meters, he had to consider diving above 500 meters because Big Idiot couldn't go down that deep. Its usual depth was about 200 meters, and 400 meters was its limit. After all, great white sharks could only dive to 1,000 meters at most, and they didn't dare to stay any longer. Zhang Hai could ignore the pressure of the water, but it didn't mean that other creatures could do the same. If he encountered a sperm whale, king squid, or something in the depths of the sea, Zhang Hai might die there. He cherished his life so much. After catching the fish, Zhang Hai looked at the time. Unknowingly, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. These girls may have ignored the time when they were playing on the shore. It didn't matter if they didn't eat lunch, but dinner had to be prepared. Therefore, Jiang Hai returned to the surface from the deep sea immediately. After throwing the things into the small boat, he washed his body with water, then started the engine and sped toward the dock. Not long after, Jiang Hai returned to the dock and drove a four-wheeled motorcycle away. Jiang Hai didn't say goodbye to the others and went home first. With the help of Daliana, Marian, and Mrs. Philemon, who came to help, he began to prepare dinner for today. Chapter 263. We're back. After pushing open the door of Jiang Hai's mansion, Selena Gomez's voice entered the room. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai walked out of the kitchen while cracking eggs. What he saw was still the same four people. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Aphrodite and the others had already left. In fact, although Aphrodite and the others had a lot of fun with these women today, these women were actually very vigilant. This could be seen from the fact that they didn't make any sound in front of these people. So if these people invited them back for dinner, they definitely wouldn't come back. It was precisely because of this that only four people came back tonight: Perwalton, Selena Gomez, Chi Li, and Chi Li's assistant. Well, Jiang Hai still couldn't remember her name. Go take a shower in the room and come down. Dinner is almost ready. Looking at the few people in front of him, they were obviously not in good condition. Perwalton and Selena Gomez's bodies were still stained with fine sand, and their faces and bodies were also stained with salt left by the sea after being dried by the sun. As for Chi Li and her assistant, although they were much neater, it was still on the beach. However, on the beach, it was still a sunny day. Although they had umbrellas, they were wearing women's suits. They were still sweating profusely. Obviously, they were not in a good state. Jiang Hai's words, this time, these women did not refuse. Selena and Perwalton immediately went upstairs, but Chi Li and her assistant hesitated for a moment. "Oh, I haven't asked yet, are you going to live here too?" Looking at the two, Jiang Hai patted his forehead. It seems that he hasn't arranged a place for them to live yet. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li raised her head and said with a serious face, "Of course, can't we?" Seeing that she was obviously not in good condition, but still pretending to be arrogant, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This woman is really. Sometimes I miss her. Okay, I'll take you upstairs. After handing the egg liquid to Daliana, Jiang Hai took the two upstairs. Maybe because Jiang Hai felt that the two people's relationship with Perwalton wasn't very good, he also arranged their room across from Perwalton's. For Jiang Hai, watching a good show was the happiest thing in the world. "This is your room, go take a shower, change your clothes, and come down for dinner, I guess you're hungry." Carrying the two people's luggage, Jiang Hai came to the front of the guest room, put the luggage at the door, and turned to leave. "Jiang Hai, I think we should talk, have a good talk. I don't know when you have time." But as soon as Jiang Hai left, Chi Li had already stretched out her hand, grabbed Jiang Hai's wrist, and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. "Oh, since you are here, I think we will have time to talk." Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai didn't look back, but just said a sentence calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li's eyes were a little hesitant, but she still let go of Jiang Hai's hand. The moment she let go, Jiang Hai continued to walk forward, and soon disappeared at the corner of the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Chi Li's assistant also puffed up her face and said unhappily, "President Chi, look at his attitude. He left us on the beach for half a day, and now he doesn't even give us time to meet?" To be honest, after she came here, she did change her view of Jiang Hai. This Jiang Hai seemed to be a bit interesting. Although she didn't know where he got the money to build this villa, at least as Chi Li's assistant, she knew very well that Jiang Hai didn't use the name of Chi Li or the Chi family to get this villa, and now it seemed that he had some cooperation with the world's largest retailer Walmart, which was really unexpected. In the past, she felt that Jiang Hai was a mud that couldn't be supported, but when this mud began to shine, she was a little confused. But this didn't mean that she could tolerate Jiang Hai's arrogance. They had already delivered themselves to his door, but he still took it. This guy. Hearing her words, Chi Li narrowed her eyes, but there was no expression of anger on her face. Instead, she directly picked up her luggage and went to the room. Seeing that Chi Li didn't speak, the assistant could only helplessly open her mouth, and finally helplessly enter the next room. As for Jiang Hai at this time, he didn't know if he was careless or what, but after he went downstairs and entered the kitchen, He had already forgotten about this matter. Facts proved that Zhang Hai was indeed not the kind of person who liked to think about unrequited love, nor was he the kind of person who liked to think too much. About 10 minutes later, the four women went downstairs, and Zhang Hai had already prepared dinner. Zhang Hai's dinner had a total of 8 dishes. This was also the habit of Huaxia people. 6, 8, 10, these were all very auspicious numbers. 6 was 6, 6 was good luck, 8 was good luck, 10 was 10, 10 was 10, 10 was beautiful. Of course, December's lunar red was also good, 16 was good, 18 was good, but Zhang Hai couldn't make it. So, he only had a total of 8 dishes. The most eye-catching dishes were 2 plates of lobsters and a plate of steamed lobsters. This meter-long lobster lying on the plate was really quite scary. There was also a plate of lobsters, baked with cheese, which was made by Mrs. Philemon. In fact, it was also a dish she had just learned after coming here. After all, with the income of a cowboy, even if they bought lobsters, they would only buy small lobsters. Those lobsters could be eaten as snacks, and it was too troublesome to make them with cheese. This was all learned after coming to Zhang Hai. Around the 2 plates of lobsters, there were 6 dishes. Steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, which was made by Zhang Hai, and fried grouper strips, which was made by taking off the flesh of the grouper and placing it on an iron plate to fry. Generally, this was the way to fry cod strips. Zhang Hai didn't have many opportunities to fry grouper, and this kind of fish tasted best when steamed. But considering that Walton and Selena Gomez weren't used to steamed dishes, it wasn't bad to make it this way. In addition to these 3 dishes, there were 3 other dishes. Of course, the main dish, the steak, was divided into 2 portions by Zhang Hai. One portion was a fried steak that could be eaten directly with a fork, and the other portion was a steak like in a Western restaurant, 1 portion per person. These were all specially selected beef, but the ones that were eaten whole with a fork were the worst among the specially selected beef. The good ones were all made like that. In addition to the 2 steaks, there was also a large bowl of vegetable and fruit salad. This was today's dish, and there was also a large bowl of cheddar soup on the side, which was a must-have. Other than that, the main dish was white bread. After these things were arranged, Mrs. Philemon left first, and Zhang Hai's group of 7 stayed to eat. The 7 of them also sat down under Zhang Hai's signal, but there were some rules when they sat down. Zhang Hai naturally sat at the main seat, and the 2 seats beside him were for Delina and Marian. After all, these 2 were also the masters of this place. But next to Delina were Walton and Selena Gomez, and next to Marian were Xueqi and her assistant. But after her assistant came downstairs, her original dissatisfaction disappeared. At this time, her eyes were only on the 2 lobsters, the large plate of 2-headed abalone, the large plate of sea cucumber, and countless steaks. She suddenly felt that Zhang Hai was quite good. At least she didn't have to worry about not being able to eat good food with him. Since you're all here, sit down and eat. Seeing everyone sit down, Zhang Hai sat at the main seat and smiled at everyone. He was not a Westerner, nor was he a Huaxia scholar. He didn't have anything to be particular about. Whether it was others who invited him to eat or he invited others to eat, the most important thing was to feel comfortable and comfortable. Extravagance and etiquette didn't work for him. He didn't want to be controlled by others when he was eating. Zhang Hai, aren't you going to introduce them first? Seeing Zhang Hai picking up the fork to eat the steak, Xueqi couldn't help but cough lightly, then raised her head and looked at Zhang Hai. What's there to introduce? Didn't I introduce them just now? Walton. Selena Gomez. Hearing Xueqi's words, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts, but Xueqi rolled her eyes at him, and at the same time, signaled to his side with her eyes. At this time, Zhang Hai remembered that Xueqi wanted him to introduce Delina and Marian. This is Delina Iveline, my adopted daughter. This is her twin sister, Marian Iveline. This is Walton. You've met in the morning. She's the god of wealth who came to give your dad money this time. This is Selena Gomez. Haven't you heard her songs before? As for these 2, this is Xueqi, your dad's. Since Xueqi wanted to introduce them, Zhang Hai didn't say much, and directly introduced them at the dining table. It was fine when he first introduced Walton, but when he introduced Xueqi, Zhang Hai hesitated a little, because he didn't know what to introduce. It seemed like he only said that she was his friend on the beach just now, so he should call her his friend now. But before Zhang Hai finished his words, Xueqi interrupted Zhang Hai, I'm your mother, his wife. My name is Chi. Maybe you've heard him talk about me, maybe you haven't, but it doesn't matter. This is a gift I brought from China. I hope you like it. Listening to Chi Li's standard English pronunciation, Jiang Hai was stunned, Walton and Selena Gomez were stunned. Even Delina and Marion were stunned, including Chi Li's assistant. At this time, countless eyes were looking at her. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.